The NHS faces the biggest day of industrial action in its history next month as nurses continue striking today.
Good morning, it's 6 o'clock on Thursday, January the 19th. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel, Webster and Andrew Pearce.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The NHS faces a day of unprecedented disruption next month, with ambulance and nursing staff staging joint walkouts. It comes as thousands of nurses begin a second consecutive day of strike action.
And the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, is not going to include any tax cuts at all in his next fiscal statement due in March. Tory MPs have reacted with anger, with the former party leader Ian Dunkersford saying not cutting taxes could cost the party the next general election.
What this job takes, and I know that I no longer have enough in the tank to do it justice. It's that simple.
Jacinda Ardern has announced her resignation as Prime Minister of New Zealand. She'll stand down no later than February the 7th, but will remain an MP until an election in October.
And the King, he's asked for the profits from a £1 billion wind farm deal on Crown Estate land to be given back to the public instead of entering the coffers of the monarchy. It comes after the King highlighted the anxiety and hardship of the cost of living crisis in his first ever Christmas message.
I suppose he really is putting his money where his mouth is when it comes to, climate change and
I think about the fuss if the money had stayed in his coffers.
Absolutely. Let us know your thoughts on that and all the rest of the day's news at GBNews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us. And don't forget, we love to hear where you're watching or listening from.
Well, the NHS is facing the worst day of strike action in its history. Ambulance and nursing staff are staging joint walkouts on the same day next month.
It comes as the second day of nursing strikes kicks off across 55 trusts in England.
A 24-hour strike by the Welsh Ambulance Service also begins today, with another walkout scheduled for Monday.
Well, our East Midlands reporter Will Holmes joined the nurses' picket line in Derby yesterday and has the story.
Under the watchful eye of history's most famous health worker, Florence Nightingale, the nurses of the present fight for the future of their profession. Ellie has joined the picket here in Derby. She works in the community.
Me personally, I can't do the kind of nursing that I want to do, the kind of nursing that I trained to do, and the reason that I came to the job. You're rushing around, you finish work at the end of the day feeling like you haven't done a good job for your patients. When it's right, it's the most rewarding job in the world, and that's why we do it, and that's why we're here fighting for a better profession, for people to want to do the job, so there's enough of us to provide really good care.
There are picket lines like this one in Derby across the country, and it doesn't really matter where you go because you'll hear the same answers from the nurses, that this strike is about pay and working conditions, because it seems that you can't improve one without doing something about the other.
Sam has worked in the NHS for 13 years. He may be outnumbered by his female colleagues, but he's facing the same financial challenges.
Everything's going up. We're now having to look more and more into our bank accounts. I'm having to, the week before payday comes along, I'm having to budget that a lot more.
In the last independent pay review, NHS workers were given on average a 4% pay rise. Amidst high inflation, the Royal College of Nursing says that's not enough. Sandy is from the union. She says they won't back down until the government negotiates on pay.
We don't want to end it without negotiations, and we will continue. Our mandate is until the end of May for us to be able to strike, and as it stands at the moment, we would go back out to ballot our members at the end of May to see if they wanted to continue striking if nothing's been brought to the table.
Nurses have agreed exemptions, like covering chemotherapy and dialysis, but the strikes are hurting an already troubled health service. Newly announced action by NHS colleagues in the ambulance service will fall on the same day in February as nursing strikes. The challenges for both the NHS and the government are great. Health Secretary Steve Barclay.
Well, I want to work constructively with the trade unions in terms of the pay review body process. Those are the discussions we have. That is a constructive way that I and other ministers are engaging with our respective trade unions. But ultimately, we need to act in the interests of the patient.
Frozen in place, it appears that this dispute will outlast winter. Will Hollis for GB News in Derby.
Well, joining us now is the political editor of the Daily Express, Sam Lister. Good morning to you, Sam. Look, the pressure is really building on the government here. Wes Streeting really making capital out of all of this for the Labour Party. What can be done to try and avert this?
It's really difficult, and actually Steve Barclay, the Health Secretary, yesterday, he ruled out a 10% increase in nurses' pay, and that's a really big blow to the nursing union because that they felt like that was an olive branch. They wanted to meet the government halfway. They kind of put that figure forward, and so I think we've reached a real setback, and actually things had got to quite a good point last week where there's been a big change in tone in the talks between the nursing unions and the government, but that was blown out of the water yesterday. And obviously you've got this huge day of strikes next month with ambulance workers joining nurses taking action. And health leaders are actually saying, look, this is going to be really difficult for patients. This is going to have a big impact.
Politically for the government too, to be in a protracted dispute with the nurses, we know overwhelmingly the public are on the nurses' side.
Yeah.
It's a very bad look.
Yeah, and this is the thing, that there is no sign of that public support waning. I think people realise it's a really tough job and nurses really had a difficult time through the pandemic and they deserve a decent pay. And actually there's a really conservative argument for paying nurses well because if there is a shortage of supply of nurses, which there is, there's about 47,000 vacancies, you've got to pay people more. Otherwise, they're going to go and work in Amazon or somewhere else where the conditions are not quite so difficult. You're not working 14-hour days and what have you. So, there is an argument to be made, a conservative argument to pay them more.
There is a conservative argument to be made to pay more, but also there is the Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak argument very much that inflation is the enemy of all, but not least the public sector. And we saw the minute decrease in inflation announced yesterday. And in many ways, the Chancellor feeling vindicated that he has to continue on, that he cannot deviate or be distracted for his ambition of trying to halve inflation. Yeah, and actually I think talking to the Treasury yesterday, I think they were quite disappointed with that very slight drop in inflation. They were hoping for a little bit more. And so I think you're right that they are keenly aware of inflation is the number one issue to deal with.
And even in that good news about the inflation of figures, Sam, the fact food inflation has gone up even higher and it's now its highest level since the 70s. And that's how people watching this programme understand inflation, don't they? They can barely afford, some of them, to heat their homes. And the cost of their weekly shopping bill is still going up much faster than their wages.
Absolutely, and we go back to the nurses. They should be able to go to the supermarket, pay for the shop, and not be worrying. And I think it's a very difficult thing for the government to be so hard line with nurses when the public are very sympathetic.
Is there a change in emphasis also from the Royal College of Nursing? Because I heard Pat Cullen on the interview round yesterday, the General Secretary. She was talking about how we're fighting to get more staff. We're trying to start fighting to get a minimum service level of cover. She wasn't talking about the pay. Yeah,
I think that's it. They want to make the point that actually the NHS is under pressure just generally, and you've got to put some money into it. You've got to invest in it. I mean, we know it is a bottomless pit, and there are jobs that could be got rid of. We all know the kind of made-up title jobs that a lot of people think, actually, why are you putting money into those jobs? Put them into the front line. And I think people do need to kind of get a grip on the organisational front in the NHS.
I mean, it's an unenviable task, isn't it, to govern at the moment? Because whilst you've got all of these pressures from the unions and from the public sector, you've also now got members of your own party saying we need tax cuts and we need them announced in March. And we know that every percentage pay increase is hugely costly for the Treasury. Is he going to stick to his guns, do you think, on the budget, the Chancellor, and keep these tax cuts up for election time?
I think it would be a surprise to make tax cuts in March. I think it's too early. I think, given the plans they set out in the autumn, I think it would be quite a leap to then suddenly go from the highest tax burden to 6 months later start cutting taxes.
Is there not going to be any proverbial white rabbit plucked out of that hat sack? Because surely it's not just going to be another budget of doom and unrelenting.
Well, this is the problem, and actually when you talk to Conservative MPs, the thing that is lacking at the moment is hope. And actually everybody understands that after the period of chaos we've had, you need competence in government, you need a bit of period of calm. But actually, they need some hope. You've got to be able to tell the public that actually good times are on the way. You can't just make them eat the greens all the time, can you? There has to be something good down the line, but it doesn't seem to be there at the moment.
What was the Chancellor doing with those stupid paper cups, Jessie? Did you see
trying to explain coffee and
inflation.
Mansplaining.
I felt a bit patronised by it. It was ludicrous, wasn't it?
I don't know. I'm not quite sure who it was aimed at, but I don't think it really helped the cause.
I think most people are pretty financially literate, aren't they? They all know exactly how much a cup of coffee is costing them at the moment. All right, Sam, thank you very much indeed. Well, we're continuing now to talk about the situation and the pressures being felt by the NHS. And someone who's experienced those firsthand working within the NHS is doctor and author of Not in the Best Health, Charles Godden, who joins us now. And very good morning to you, Doctor. I've wanted to get you on the programme for a while, and your book, absolutely fascinating account of your experiences having been a consultant paediatrician for decades. And I just want to start, if you don't mind, by talking about the reason that you actually quit the NHS in 2015, because you had a very traumatic situation with a girl who had a life or death emergency, and you really didn't feel that you had the support and backing that you required to do a good job.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. I quit when I was 56 in 2016, and the overriding reason for that was I realised that I was vulnerable to being exposed without any junior doctor's support. What happened was there was a girl who was born called Grace. She hasn't asked for anonymity, so I can mention her name. And she was critically ill. And the registrar left to go home and left me by myself on site. And that was a terrifying experience. So after that, age 56, I realised that it was getting more difficult to do on-call. And the risk to my working practices was increasing if I was going to be vulnerable to having to work by myself with critically ill babies.
And of course, it's a tragedy to lose somebody like you from the National Health Service with decades of experience and at the top of the industry, if you want to call it that, as a consultant. But this is a picture that you've seen for yourself across the NHS. Lots of consultants leaving their jobs, lots of posts. We hear about 47,000 nurses' posts not being filled. And so you've written this book about the problems that you have seen within the NHS. And what is the sort of overriding message that you want people to take from that?
Yes, I think the government talk about recruitment, and I think retention is probably more important. There's not much point. We're like a sieve at the moment. There's not very much point keeping pouring water in at the top if it falls out at the bottom. And we need to work on a way of keeping the senior clinicians, nurses, doctors, and other health staff in the NHS. I accept that the more senior members of staff cost more money. I accept the more senior members of staff probably are pricklier and maybe more difficult to deal with. But they're very good value for the country, and we need to keep these people in, so we need to respect them.
Well, in the book, you talk about a sort of unhelpful characterisation of doctors by politicians and also by journalists. What do you mean by that?
Please repeat. What do I say in the book about them?
Well, yes, just explain to me how you feel as though doctors like you were being mischaracterised by people like me, and you know, how important it was for the public to judge the health service on the facts rather than on the way it's sort of being presented to them.
OK, I think my view is that the government have perhaps misled the press, and the press have perhaps therefore misled the public on how the NHS works. So the purpose of my book was try to explain to the public how we work. I came to the conclusion I had to write this book, Not in the Best of Health, because I was surprised by my non-medical friends and their lack of understanding of what it's actually like working on the front line, either as a doctor, as a nurse, or as a porter, or as a receptionist, or as a secretary. And I had the feeling that the people outside of the National Health Service struggle to comprehend the environment that we work within. And I think the reason for that is that the government misrepresent our environment. For example, they...
Yeah, go on.
They talk about increasing recruitment, but they don't actually talk about the number of people who are actually there. That's just one example.
OK, and look, some people would argue, and many have, that people like you have been arguing this for a while, but actually, finally, the public are seeing the challenges that are there because their experiences are so poor now when they're going into A&E and having to wait or having operations cancelled because of this industrial action, which is as a consequence of those working conditions that you describe. But in your book, it's not all doom and gloom. You do come up with some solutions of how you see what you believe to be a sacrosanct institution being saved. How do you think the NHS can be reformed and turned around? What needs to be done? Besides just more money, please don't just say more money.
Yes, well, I think to start off with, the NHS probably needs to be removed from the hands of the politicians. I can't believe there are many politicians who are brave enough to stand up and risk their jobs and their pensions by saying that they've failed and that the NHS has failed and things have to change. So I do believe that the NHS must change. And the first thing I would do is I would accept that we can't do everything for everybody. When I qualified at age 23 in 1983, I did believe this. However, now I don't believe this. And there are many reasons for this. And we in the UK are the only country in the world who tries to do everything. And I feel that we're standing in a room full of spinning plates, and all the while we're surrounded by the frequent sound of smashing crockery. So I would look at creating a body that is apolitical, that looks at how we can improve matters. The first thing I would look at is being open about rationing, because we cannot continue to do everything. I would then look at our NHS litigation situation. We currently have put £80 billion aside for NHS litigation. Now, politicians talk about how much it costs to pay the staff. They spend approximately £60 billion per year. £80 billion has been put aside for NHS litigation. Other countries run systems such as a no-fault compensation in New Zealand, and I can see no reason why we can't do that. And finally, I've talked about this business about us being a sieve, and we really need somebody to put the plug back in the bath, because the senior staff, the experienced staff, do cost more. They are pricklier, but they are very important and they're essential for the safe running of the NHS.
Well, it's absolutely fascinating to talk to you, Dr. Godden. I could talk to you for half an hour. I'm absolutely delighted that we got you on the programme. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences. And I'm pleased to tell our listeners and viewers that the little girl, Grace, that you were talking about at the beginning of the interview is doing really well, age 7, running around, healthy and happy. So thank you very much for your time this morning.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Right, the time's 6:17.
What an interesting man.
Wasn't he?
Really interesting.
Yeah. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
The government has announced a £2 billion fund for 100 levelling up projects in the UK. It's going to be called Gauging Up. The money will go towards better transport links, community regeneration and restoring local heritage sites. We're going to be speaking to Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove at 8:20 this morning.
Universities have seen an increase in anti-Semitism over the past 2 academic years. The Community Security Trusts say they've received 150 reports of incidents affecting Jewish students, academics and university staff. That's a 22% increase on the previous 2 years. It comes after an independent investigation found a hostile culture towards Jewish students in the National Union of Students.
And the King has requested profits from a £1 billion a year Crown Estate wind farm deal should be used for the wider public good. The money would normally have gone towards the King's sovereign grant.
Now, this news broke overnight, probably whilst you were sleeping. New Zealand's Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, has announced her resignation after 5.5 years at the helm.
She's stepping down as Labour Party leader no later than February the 7th, and there will be a vote in the coming days to determine her replacement. Here's what she said.
The only interesting angle that you will find is that after going on 6 years of some big challenges, I am human. Politicians are human. We give all that we can for as long as we can, and then it's time. And for me, it's time.
Well, we're joined now from Auckland by senior reporter at News Talk ZB, Chelsea Daniels. A very good morning to you. I assume it's late at night, or I have no idea actually what the time is in New Zealand, where you are 7 p.m, I'm being told. But look, this has come as a huge shock. Has it come as a shock to New Zealanders as well?
Look, here and there, I think it is being called a shock resignation. But look, there has been some talk about her resigning as Prime Minister, especially ahead of this year's general election for a little while now, probably about 6 months. So it didn't come as much of a surprise. But this morning we did go into her speech thinking we'll get an election date. We did, October 14. But as soon as she said those words that she'd been reflecting over summer, that kind of pricked our ears up and thought, hang on, we think we know this is going to go.
She's only 42. It's extraordinary. Most politicians go on and on and on. And she had been probably one of the most popular prime ministers, leaders in the world. But had that started to change for her?
It did. And now that Jacinda mania that started in 2017 when she first came into power has kind of dwindled over the last couple of years. And that's down to a lot of that COVID fatigue a lot of us are feeling at the moment. For example, some freedom protesters came outside of the place where they're doing their Labour retreat in Napier with bagpipes shouting freedom after they heard the news. Those are the kind of people that have been protesting things like COVID vaccines, COVID mandates, and of course COVID lockdowns as well. I'm sure you guys have got a lot of the same groups there.
She's a fascinating person just in her personal life. I believe when she came to office, her child was extremely young. And am I right in thinking her partner decided to be the stay-at-home dad? I mean, refreshingly modern and a part of, I suppose, why the whole Jacinda mania kicked off. And her handling, of course, of that awful massacre in New Zealand as well earned her plaudits around the world. Do you think she'll be, what will her legacy be? Do you think it will be positive or negative overall, given those factors?
I think definitely her legacy will be responding in a crisis. Like you said, the Christchurch terror attack in 2019, then later that year, the White Island volcano erupted, and then she took us through COVID as well. So a lot of unprecedented times for Jacinda. She's faced more firsts in New Zealand than any other Prime Minister has had to face, quite frankly. So her legacy is going to be that empathy, that compassion that everyone's fallen in love with around the world and the globe. And especially for women as well. Remember, she did take her daughter Neve as a baby into the UN General Assembly when she first had her. And of course, she had her just after she became Prime Minister. She entered motherhood.
Well, fascinating.
Absolutely.
Josie Daniels, thanks very much for joining us. Interesting, how often do politicians know when to go?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, she's unusual in that sense. They always
the polls
cling in.
were turning against her. She's done it and she's gone. I mean,
maybe she'll come back. You never know.
Oh, another Boris.
Exactly. Maybe she'll write her memoirs first.
Yes.
Fast.
I don't think she'll get as many millions as Boris Johnson will get his.
We're going to take a break. After that, we're talking about dementia. Really interesting, this research that shows that hearing tests in your 30s and 40s could really help you to prevent it in later life. First of all, here's your forecast.
Good morning, Alex Deegan here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Another cold one out there this morning. Again, ice is a big hazard if you're heading out to the roads. We do still have some sleet and snow falling in places. Low pressure dominating up to the northeast. There is this little low, but that's going to skirt to the south. So we're kind of in the dry zone for much of the UK. Not much rain around, many places just dry and bright, but it is cold. It's in the west where we've seen some showers overnight that things are potentially icy, and still some snow flurries for North Wales, northwest England this morning and parts of Northern Ireland, and certainly to come more snow across northern Scotland as well, although turning more to rain now along the coasts and across the Northern Isles, but certainly over the hills of northern Scotland. Further snow today. Elsewhere, well, most places just dry and cold. Temperatures getting up to 3 or 4 Celsius this afternoon with light winds in the sunny spells. We could get to 5 or 6 in the southwest, a bit more cloud likely here. As we go through the nights, we'll continue to see some wintry showers in the northeast, but even here they start to ease off, and certainly showers further west tending to die away. Could still be a little bit icy though as we head into tomorrow morning, and it could also be foggy. Some thick fog patches likely to form, freezing fog as well as temperatures yet again drop below freezing even in towns and cities. Rural spots will be well below on Friday morning. For most Fridays, just another cold but bright and fine sunny day. Just a chance of 1 or 2 showers across parts of the east, northern England, North Wales and particularly Northern Ireland. Could have some stubborn fog patches that last for most of the day, but say for many it'll just be bright, fine, sunny, cold, but temperatures are just getting up a little higher, closer to average, 3 or 5 degrees across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, 6 or 7 further south. There's that low diving southwards, but weather fronts will try and edge in over the next few days. So it's cold tomorrow, but slowly turning milder, at least in the west, as we go through the weekend. Goodbye.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back at 6:27. Still to come on the programme this morning.
Well, at 6:45, we're going to be looking forward to the announcement of the 2023 BAFTA nominations. And are any big British films? Are there some we need to keep an eye out for?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's going to be Kate Blanchett, the star of the show.
Clear the board, isn't she?
Drivers could soon be allowed to delay their first MOT under new plans to cut costs for vehicle owners. But is it enough? We'll find out at 7:15.
Don't forget you can get in touch in all the usual ways. Email us, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet @gbnews.
Now, the Line of Duty star actress Vicky McClure has accused the government of failing people with dementia. She said patients are left struggling and alone after a diagnosis.
It comes as a study draws a link between the onset of dementia and hearing loss. Fascinating. Experts are recommending people in their 30s, that's right, in your 30s, have regular hearing checkups to prevent it. So we're going to speak now to dementia expert Professor June Andrews. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning.
Is this the first link between being hard of hearing and dementia?
No, this is something that we've known for quite a long time. In fact, a couple of years ago, the World Health Organization set out some things which every country should be doing in order to reduce the prevalence of dementia in their own country. And one of the 12 things that they recommended was that hearing loss should be addressed, because the research shows that there is a direct link between hearing loss and the onset of dementia. Nobody's terribly sure why this is, but the suggestion is that the isolation and the difficulty in communicating that comes from hearing loss is something that could be a contributory factor towards the onset of dementia. So attending to hearing loss where it is it certainly wouldn't be a cure for dementia, but it would certainly delay the onset of dementia for those people who are affected. There's a definite link. And in addition to that, sometimes you find older people who have got hearing loss show some of the symptoms that we associate with dementia. They find it hard to concentrate, they can't follow a conversation, and when you check the hearing and fix the hearing, the person is as good as new. So hearing loss and dementia is something we've known about for a while, and getting your hearing checked is quite important.
It's so interesting because I've long thought, you know, it's not really a taboo to wear glasses, is it? You go for regular eye checks and people put glasses on from a young age. But if you're in your 30s and 40s, do you look after your ear health? And presumably, as you're finding out, people aren't. But if people do go forward and they have their hearing tests and they are told they might have a bit of a problem, are you suggesting from their 30s and 40s people should be wearing hearing aids? And is it like with sight, if you don't look after that little bit of hearing loss, it can actually get worse?
Well, the thing about hearing aids is, at the moment, they're not really as sexy as specs. It just is the case that you see lots of film stars and people on television wearing glasses, and it can be a real fashion item. The hearing aid has never become a fashion item. And in fact, it's associated, like hearing loss, people think of it as a sign of ageing, and none of us wants to be older than we feel. So that's why there are so many really good hearing aids that just disappear right inside the ear. They can't be seen. So it's important that if you've got a hearing problem that you should wear that hearing aid, and that will help you stay well. As to the age at which you get your hearing tested, in some ways it's more important to think about symptoms. If one day your hearing suddenly is reduced, it's very urgent to go and see someone about it straight away. And you can go and see a high street audiologist. If you start to have a discharge from your ears, you should see a doctor. There are some of the sudden changes in hearing that are probably a medical emergency. But if you just want to know whether your hearing is up to scratch, then apart from the high street audiologists that will check your hearing, there are plenty of online hearing checks that you can have, and they will reassure you. The sort of thing that you should worry about is perhaps always having to say to people, what did you say? Having to have difficulty if you're out in the pub, as a younger person is more likely to be. If you're out in a social situation and you can't hear conversations when there's a busy background, that's the time when you should worry. But if your hearing is okay and you're young, then there's probably no need for a test. But as soon as you know what the kinds of problems are that you should check out, they're the times to go and see someone, either a doctor, an audiologist, or get one of those online hearing tests to see whether or not you need some help.
And today, Vicky McClure, the Line of Duty actress, Arlene Phillips, who was, of course, part of Strictly Come Dancing, they're joining a delegation to Downing Street, handing in a letter to Number 10, urging the government not to abandon that commitment by Boris Johnson to pledge millions of pounds more for research into Alzheimer's. Professor, in your view, is the government doing enough?
Absolutely not. I think that people who are affected by dementia are hit by a whole range of things. First of all, the majority of people who have dementia are older, and older people have challenges anyway. The majority of them are living at home, and so they're highly dependent on an army of family carers who take care of them and keep them going. The problems that are created for care homes right now because of the cost of running a care home for those people who are in care homes, these costs have gone up, the cost of fuel, the cost of staff. Everybody who's affected by dementia has a massive challenge right now, and I think more could be done by governments to help those people. The government is entirely dependent on the army of carers, many of whom are women who care for the person at home and who are carrying an enormous burden. And if our public services don't do more for people with dementia, then those carers themselves will become ill. There's research that shows that. So I think that more strength to the people who are asking for more help for people with dementia. Research is hugely important, but disappointingly, and I've spoken about this on your programme before, much of the research that is coming through, which is about cures, that research doesn't seem to be proving particularly successful at the moment. The kind of research that is really valuable is research that would show how to make life easier for people who are already affected, because life can be very difficult. And sometimes after diagnosis, people don't get an awful lot of immediate help.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, listen, Professor Andrews, fascinating to talk to you. I hope that's sparked some sort of warning for a few people listening this morning. Really appreciate your time.
I can't tell. I think the last hearing test I had was when I was at school.
Well, I had one because of our earpieces that we wear, and I went to get a new earpiece fitted, and they did a little audiology test, and they did say in the ear that I wear my earpiece, I actually have reduced hearing. So I'm one of these people going, uh-oh, dementia's coming my way. And of course, my grandmother had dementia, so I'm very conscious. And also the links with lack of sleep.
Yeah.
And we also don't get much sleep, so
No.
I'm always really interested in these
And of course,
stories.
they're saying currently 900,000 people have dementia. I don't believe
Much
that
more.
figure. Of course, it's much more.
Yeah,
Of course, it's
absolutely
much
right.
more.
Well, look, stay with us. We'll be back after that. We've got Freddie Gray and Emma Burnell taking you through your Thursday papers.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deems & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel. Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Well, let's bring you up to date with today's front pages.
Here's The Guardian. It's leading with nurses and ambulance workers and their unprecedented joint strikes set to take place on the 6th of Feb.
And my newspaper, the Daily Mail, reports the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, of course, failing to cut taxes in the upcoming budget, with a warning it will cost the Tories at the next general election.
The Express features King Charles's gift to the nation as he donates £250 million to tackle the cost of living crisis.
And the Telegraph runs with Sir James Dyson's comments. He's the billionaire entrepreneur criticising Rishi Sunak and his economic approach, which he calls stupid.
We're going through the papers this morning, joined by Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, and the political consultant, Emma Burnell. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Coming in. We love to see you. Freddie, let's start with Andrew's paper then, and this story about cut taxes or we'll lose the election. Look, it's not that long since Kwasi Kwarteng tried to do just that. Are we ready for this in March? Do we really want that?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Kwasi Kwarteng because really I think this Mail splash is about Tory MPs saying, let's get back towards that agenda. Because for a lot of the party, they think that the problem wasn't the direction on tax, which, you know, Tories are supposed to cut taxes. It was just that it was very, very badly presented, very badly managed. And the hope was that Rishi Sunak, having calmed the markets, would get back towards a pro-growth, lower tax agenda. And the question is the speed at which he wants to do it. I mean, he's saying, and Hunt is saying, yes, we will do it, but we've still got to get the economy under control. And Tory MPs are saying, no, we've got to do it now. We're in a crisis. We're going to lose this election.
When we say Tory MPs, I mean, is it the usual suspects, the John Redwoods, Ian Duncan-Smiths, or are there some unexpected?
I think there are unexpected. I mean, I think a lot of Tory MPs are looking at the next election thinking, I'm going to lose my seat unless we do something. And they're coming up with Tory answers. And the Tory answer is to cut taxes and make people more in charge of their own money and promote growth. And is growth a dirty word? I don't think it is.
And we are crippled by the biggest tax burden, Emma, in 70 years.
I mean, I think the Tories are in a real bind here because they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. We have a very high tax burden. We also don't feel that public services are working. So if they cut taxes and just withdraw that money from public services, I don't think any of the problems, any of the bad headlines, any of the real difficulties the government are facing are going to be dealt with. So they could cut taxes. If they do, they're going to get criticised from one side. If they don't, they'll get criticised from the other. And I think what this shows is that the Tories are fairly ungovernable. Even, Rishi Sunak may have calmed things down from the place that Liz Truss took them to, where they were essentially at civil war constantly. But there is a real conversation happening within the Tories about the difficulty of holding together the coalition that wanted high spending. Boris's cakeism, essentially, have the cake, eat the cake, cut the taxes, spend the taxes, and they just don't have an answer that pleases everyone.
The Telegraph front page, which is referring to James Dyson, the Hoover chap, isn't on our list, but I do want to bring it in because I think it is relevant. And he talks about sort of being trapped in COVID inertia and that growth is a dirty word. He appears to be calling for the same thing as many of these Conservative MPs. So is that momentum then building? Do you think that there is going to be untenable pressure on the Chancellor to change course?
I think the point about growth, if it works, if old Tory economics works, is that growth does increase the size of the national purse because you have a bigger economy and therefore you can take more money out of that share, even if that share is slightly smaller than it would have been. But 47% of GDP, which is our tax burden at the moment, is enormous. And Jeremy Hunt has no plans, according to his slimmed-down statement in March, to bring that down.
And the Tories, going into any general election, the Tories are always miles ahead of Labour on who do you most trust to run the economy.
Yes.
Because they were seen as a tax-cutting party. They could go into the next general election with Labour more trusted.
Even though Rishi Sunak has sort of pegged that back a bit after he calmed the markets. But yes, again, I mean, because Labour are saying fairly sensible things on the economy, not entirely sensible things, but fairly sensible things, and they're presenting themselves as a party that you can trust with your money.
What do you think about the fact that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer are in Davos at the World Economic Forum, and it's a no-show from the PM and the Chancellor?
It's fascinating, isn't it? I think it's... both sides have done the right thing for themselves politically in terms of managing their own political image. Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer want to be seen by business as a trusted partner. Rishi Sunak is desperate not to be seen as that weird Davos finance guy. So him not being there is exactly the right choice for him politically. Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves being there politically. I mean, they've sent, Grant Shapps and Kemi Badenoch. So they've sent the sort of third tier.
What did Davos do to deserve Grant Shapps?
You might say that, Andrew. I couldn't possibly.
I think they've done quite a lot to deserve Grant Shapps. I think it's a marriage made in heaven.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
OK, should we turn to some positive news? And I have to say we've got some views in on this already about King Charles and this, what's being dubbed the wind farm windfall. Emma, this is your story, front of the Express this morning.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm as you know, my role here is the anti-monarchist.
Come on, Emma, this is a good story.
It's a good story, yeah. 250 million, nice. Why does one family own all of the coast? That's my bigger question. The £1 billion of income that is going to be coming in from this should be, in my opinion, belonging to the state rather than the Crown Estate. But I am glad that he is PR savvy enough to think, actually, I probably shouldn't be raking it in from this income right now and giving it back, giving this. But longer term, I think that there should be a pivot. Whether we have a constitutional monarchy or not, I think that there is a real question about who owns Britain and who owns the land of Britain.
And, of course, what this income, just to explain, Emma, it's that he's putting 6 wind turbine farms on Crown Estate land. It will generate £1 billion a year profit under the Crown Estate rules at the moment, which he could take the lot.
He could take the lot. But so good for him for not taking the lot, but I'd like a lot more back.
But Freddie Gray, he's going to give 25% back, which is £250 million. Would you give it to the government to spend? I wouldn't, because they'll waste it. Shouldn't he designate it to some charities himself?
I think that would be a very good idea. I mean, I think if he...
Charity's also known for waste, by the way.
Well, true, particularly Charles.
Yeah, apparently
Charles
is as well.
But, I think, well, it's obviously a PR stunt to a certain extent. I mean, I think it's sincere and genuine. I think he's going to do it. And he's gone for the more magnanimous route. But it's also very good PR for net zero.
Yes.
Because that's something that the people are not comfortable with.
No.
People don't like it. They know what it means. It means they're going to have to get some very expensive new boiler in the near future. It's going to cost them lots in tax.
While other countries are doing nothing at all about it.
And we know that green causes are dear to Charles's heart. So this is where King Charles saying, you know, I'm a benevolent king, and also you should get on board with this programme that's going to wreck your finances.
It's a win-win. And if you roll back the clock just 1 week, all the headlines all week were negative for the royal family. His wayward son.
Yeah.
So this is a bit of a way of changing that dial.
Yeah, he's moving the story on, which quite right in terms of his own PR. On the net zero point, I mean, it would be good actually if this money, this unexpected windfall to the Treasury, were then dedicated to investment in green technologies for the country.
Yeah, he must get a written commitment what they're going to do with that money, because otherwise it would just disappear into the black hole that is the government treasury.
And speaking of positive PR for the Royals, next to this on the Express, is Kate.
She's on the Express, the Daily Mail. She's on many front pages. Emma is gnashing her teeth here. She's on the front of the Telegraph too, looking fabulous.
I'm shrugging my shoulders, not gnashing my teeth.
Well, the Palace have said, the Palace all said to me before Christmas, they're going to, as the book comes out, they're going to do as many worthy press trips as they possibly can. And here she is, looking delightful with some children. It's all good for the... Kate.
Yeah, they get their money's worth from their PR, don't they?
I am Kate's biggest fan, but I do wish she'd do something besides mingling with children all the time. It is almost a bit of a stereotype that she's a lovely, cosy mummy figure.
Yes.
I don't know.
She has done some mental health stuff.
Yes, I know, but I've seen this too many times. Can't they think of something a bit more
They do need a new photo
besides her being
op.
a clothes horse or with small children?
Yeah.
Just putting it out there. Sorry, I know that's controversial. I love her, but, you know, just saying it. Freddie, let's go to the front of The Guardian. Nurses and ambulance staff to stage this unprecedented joint strike, and genuine concerns now about how the NHS can function with this level of walkout.
Well, I mean, this is going to be the Armageddon, the big monster strike coming in at the beginning of February. Hospitals will grind to a halt because all the provision will have to go towards emergency care. So anything that is an absolute emergency will grind to a halt. We know what this means. It means that there will be severer health problems in the future. There will be deaths as a result of this. It's a very, very serious thing to happen. And it's a nightmare for the government because clearly the unions are determined to make life as difficult for the government as they can. Every time the government thinks it's made some progress, it seemed to make some progress on trains last week, a little bit on health towards the end of last week, but now it's back to, you know, Armageddon threat.
But wasn't that the Treasury stepping in and stepping on the government's own toes rather than the unions being intransigent when it came to the rail strikes? From what I understand, the Mark Harper, the Transport Minister, the rail companies and the unions had got to a point of agreement and then the Treasury squashed it.
Yeah.
So it's actually the government hurting themselves here rather than this being a union versus government issue.
I think it is. I think Jeremy Hunt's very adamant.
But I think the public sympathy is disintegrating for the rail workers, actually. And we saw the head of ASLEF in some very uncomfortable interviews yesterday. He's the train drivers union, having to admit that they'd had something like a 17% real terms pay increase over the last decade.
Yeah.
No sympathy there.
And public opinion often sort of lags the news. And I think with, you know, nurses always have a large degree of public sympathy. I think doctors, BMA strike, doctors will consult very well-paid consultants. If people are dying as a result of NHS strikes, will they have public sympathy?
And I think the teacher strike's going to infuriate mums and dads.
Absolutely.
Kids haven't been through enough already.
Yeah.
Well, and the head teachers did not want to strike. Interesting, although there are conspiracy theories as to why.
Well, this is all about postal strikes. We spoke to Gillian Keegan about that, and she said they had 3 months to get those. I mean, even the Prime Minister managed to get his Christmas cards in within about 6 weeks, so 3 months.
It's a delicious irony to the idea that you can't strike because of the postal strike.
Yeah.
I mean, it is daft that they have to have a postal ballot, but I do, on the other hand, think that blaming the postal strikes is probably a bit of an own goal.
I wrote in my Christmas cards to my friends, Happy Easter, because I knew how long it was going to take to get there.
Yeah, there you go with your crystal ball again. Freddie Gray, Emma Burnell, thank you so much. We look forward to more from both of you just after 7:30.
Now let's bring you up to date with today's top stories.
Health leaders are making contingency plans for the biggest walkout in history of the NHS. As we were just discussing, it was announced that ambulance workers and nurses will combine a day of action on the 6th of February.
And Jacinda Ardern, remember her? She's announced she's quitting as the Prime Minister of New Zealand next month. She's only 42, saying she hasn't got enough in the tank to lead the country anymore. She's going to step down as Labour Party leader by February the 7th, with a vote to determine her replacement shortly after. Then there'll be a general election on October 14.
The Port of Dover is warning ferry services between Dover and Calais will be suspended today due to a national strike in France. The port has said it's still open, with services to Dunkirk running as normal, but advises travellers to allow extra time for journeys.
It's almost encouraging to hear there's strikes in other countries too. It's not just
And
for
guess
Britain.
what? They have the legislation in place already that the UK is trying to bring in.
They do. They stopped a refinery strike last year with their legislation.
Now, to lighter matters. At midday today, the cream of the acting crop will be finding out whether they've been nominated for one of the prestigious BAFTA Film Awards.
The show will air on February 19th on BBC One with hosts Richard E. Grant and Alison Hammond.
Gosh, that's a combo.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk to showbiz reporter Stephanie Tetchy, who can fill us in on the runners and riders. Good morning to you, Stephanie.
We love a bit of glamour. Glamour and glitz. And look at those glamorous earrings you're wearing.
Hardest working showbiz reporter there is. Every time I see social media on another red carpet...
Sometimes I feel like I'm ready to retire.
You never stop working.
That is showbiz for you. It's manic, it's crazy, but it's time for the Brits to have their say.
Good.
Hollywood, we've had the Golden Globes, the Critics' Choice, but BAFTAs is quintessentially British, and it's the biggest night for British film, and it's going to be exciting. Producers are promising a refreshed format and production. So at 12 o'clock, we'll be finding out who are the nominees this year. We had the clearest indication earlier this month when they released their long list of about 15 nominations per 25 categories of who made the cut. And leading the way was The Banshees of Inisherin. So this has been directed by Martin McDonagh, and it stars Colin Farrell, and it tells the tale of two friends who stop being friends, but it's more of a sinister plot to it. We've got a trailer available.
Something to you. Just tell me what I've done to you.
I just don't like you no more.
Have you been rowing?
Have you been rowing?
Have we been rowing? Well, you are rowing. It does look like we're rowing.
You can't just stop being friends with a fella.
He's dull, Siobhan.
But he's always been dull.
Maybe this whole thing has just been about getting you to stand up for yourself.
How are you, fatty? Dancing with your dog, is it?
What did you come here for?
I just came to kick your door in and give you a slagging.
The Banshees of Inisherin, and the actors there reprising their double act from In Bruges, which is obviously huge. And they did well at the Golden Globes, didn't they?
They did amazing at the Golden Globes, and they've been longlisted for 14 nominations. So Colin Farrell could potentially pick up Best Actor, Leading Actor, and Martin McDonagh, he can pick up Best Director.
He's going to have a big fight in his hands with the character playing Elvis.
He's going to have a massive fight because Elvis has been one of the most talked about films of the year, and we saw it did well at the Golden Globes as well, and even more so since the untimely passing of Lisa Marie Presley. So
he is extraordinary as Elvis Presley, though, isn't he?
He's amazing.
But as you say, I mean, just reflecting on that last week, 2 days after the Golden Globes, there they were, shoulder to shoulder.
It was quite eerie just seeing her sit in the audience, seeing him accept the award for playing her father. It's just, you know...
Don't you think she looked haunted?
She did. She looked
Well, you
quite...
look at it differently now, don't you? Know it,
Yeah.
At the time, she looked twice.
Yeah.
But then when you look back, obviously I don't want to speak ill of the doll, but she did look pretty unwell. But then when we're talking about actress categories now, we're talking about Cate Blanchett. She has been the most named actress at the moment in award season for her performance as Lydia Tarr, the controversial German orchestra conductor. But she'll have stiff competition.
She's going to win it, Stephanie.
I don't know. I think the BAFTAs might do a bit of surprise because she's got stiff competition from Viola Davis for her portrayal of the Woman King. She's got also Michelle Williams, who stars in Steven Spielberg's coming-of-age drama, The Fabelmans. Even though it was a box office flop, it seems that...
Do you know, she's a very mature actress, I think she's always been... I mean, obviously, she's gone through the whole tragedy with Heath Ledger dying and that sort of makes people sort of warm to her.
And it makes...
But I do think she's... Well, I also think Kate Blanchett's great. What do I know?
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't want to have to decide between those two.
It's so hard. And then we've got Ana de Armas, who played Marilyn Monroe in the biopic Blonde on Netflix.
That's a great film too.
And another...
I heard it was a bit of a
I
flop.
No, I loved it. It was intense viewing,
It
but I
was,
loved it.
yeah.
Can't do no wrong, and it's a hard character to pull off. And also Michelle Yeoh, she's been one of the actresses who's been done really well. She stars in something called Everything Everywhere All at Once, and she plays this interdimensional traveller, and she done really well at the Golden Globes. So I think it's going to be between Kate Blanchett and Michelle Yeoh when it comes to the leading actress awards.
She was up for She got the Critics' Circle
She
Award.
did.
And she said something extraordinary. She said, I
did she
don't know why
say?
I'm on this stage. I'm fed up with all these awards. She has been
Off you
nominated
go home,
for and I thought, well, clear off, love, and give it to let somebody else win it, because she wins so often. She's already got 2 Oscars.
And it's quite a performance, these award shows. It's all eyes on you. It's quite tense. If you lose, the camera's panning onto you. If you win, you have to have the speech and stuff. But we were talking about leading male. Obviously, I've tipped Austin Butler. But another person who's had a big Hollywood comeback this year is Brendan Fraser in The Well. He snubbed the Golden Globes because he made this accusation that the former president groped him, so he didn't attend the Golden Globes. Yeah, that was a big story for award season, but he picked up the Best Male at the Critics' Choice Awards, and I think he's going to do really well in the BAFTAs. The film was debuted at the Venice Film Festival, received a 6-minute standing ovation. In the film, he plays this morbidly obese English teacher who's trying to make amends with his daughter, and it's quite a gripping story, and I think this is Brendan Fraser's moment.
Whale.
Because he sort of did so well in the films about the mummy, and then rather disappeared.
And then he disappeared, and then he comes back with this really emotional, impactful film, and he's also gone a lot in Hollywood where he feels like he's been shunned. So this character was perfect for him and his comeback.
We're out of time. I really wanted to talk about Alison Hammond and Richard E. Grant and the most unlikely showbiz couple, but we're out of time, Stephanie.
Oh, gosh, we could talk all day about this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Now, after the break, we'll have more on the latest NHS strike action, but that comes, of course, after the weather.
Good morning, Alex Deegan here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Another cold one out there this morning. Again, ice is a big hazard if you're heading out to the roads. We do still have some sleet and snow falling in places. Low pressure dominating up to the northeast. There is this little low, but that's going to skirt to the south. So we're kind of in the dry zone for much of the UK. Not much rain around, many places just dry and bright, but it is cold. It's in the west where we've seen some showers overnight that things are potentially icy, and still some snow flurries for North Wales, North West England this morning, and parts of Northern Ireland, and certainly to come more snow across northern Scotland as well, although turning more to rain now along the coasts and across the Northern Isles, but certainly over the hills of northern Scotland. Further snow today. Elsewhere, well, most places just dry and cold. Temperatures getting up to 3 or 4 Celsius this afternoon with light winds in the sunny spells. We could get to 5 or 6 in the southwest, a bit more cloud likely here. As we go through the nights, we'll continue to see some wintry showers in the northeast, but even here they start to ease off, and certainly showers further west tending to die away. Could still be a little bit icy though as we head into tomorrow morning, and it could also be foggy. Some thick fog patches likely to form. Freezing fog as well as temperatures yet again drop below freezing, even in towns and cities. Rural spots will be well below on Friday morning. For most, Friday's just another cold but bright and fine sunny day. Just a chance of 1 or 2 showers across parts of the east, northern England, North Wales, and particularly Northern Ireland. Could have some stubborn fog patches that last for most of the day, but say for many it'll just be bright, fine, sunny, cold, but temperatures are just getting up a little higher, closer to average, 3 or 5 degrees across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, 6 or 7 further south. There's that low diving southwards, but weather fronts will try and edge in over the next few days. So it's cold tomorrow, but slowly turning milder, at least in the west, as we go through the weekend. Goodbye.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us. We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
The NHS is facing the biggest day of industrial action in its history next month. Nurses are also continuing to strike today.
Good morning, it's 7 o'clock. It's Thursday, the 19th of January. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel, Webster and Andrew Pearce.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Patients face unprecedented disruption in the health service next month, with ambulance and nursing staff staging joint walkouts. It comes as thousands of nurses begin a second consecutive day of strike action.
The Chancellor will not be including any tax cuts in his next budget due in March. Treasury insiders have revealed. Tory MPs have reacted with anger, with former party leader Ian Duncan-Smith saying that not cutting tax could cost the party the next election.
And the King has asked for the profits from a £1 billion wind farm development on Crown Estate land to be used for the wider public good instead of entering the coffers of the monarchy. It comes after His Majesty highlighted the anxiety and hardship of that cost of living crisis in his first Christmas message.
What this job takes, and I know that I no longer have enough in the tank to do it justice. It's that simple.
And Jacinda Ardern has announced her resignation as Prime Minister of New Zealand. She's to stand down no later than February the 7th, but will remain an MP until an election in October.
You can get in touch, of course, the usual way via Twitter or email gbviews@gbnews.uk. Let us know where you're watching or listening to us from.
Just to say, a couple of you messaging in about the King's gift as it's being described. The King's gesture in diverting this money is perfect. Throughout his time as Prince of Wales, he's done the best for his people and appears to be doing the same as King. Let us know if you agree.
Well, the NHS is facing the worst day of strike action in its history, with ambulance and nursing staff staging joint walkouts next month.
It comes as a second day of nursing strikes kicks off across 55 trusts in England today. Patients could again face disruption to operations and appointments, though emergency care will continue.
And a 24-hour strike by the Welsh Ambulance Service also begins today, with another walkout scheduled for Monday.
Well, our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis joined the nurses' picket line in Derby yesterday and has this for us.
Under the watchful eye of history's most famous health worker, Florence Nightingale, the nurses of the present fight for the future of their profession. Ellie has joined the picket here in Derby. She works in the community.
Me personally, I can't do the kind of nursing that I want to do, the kind of nursing that I trained to do, and the reason that I came to the job. You're rushing around, you finish work at the end of the day feeling like you haven't done a good job for your patients. When it's right, it's the most rewarding job in the world, and that's why we do it, and that's why we're here fighting for a better profession, for people to want to do the job, so there's enough of us to provide really good care.
There are picket lines like this one in Derby across the country, and it doesn't really matter where you go because you'll hear the same answers from the nurses, that this strike is about pay and working conditions, because it seems that you can't improve one without doing something about the other.
Sam has worked in the NHS for 13 years. He may be outnumbered by his female colleagues, but he's facing the same financial challenges.
Everything's going up. You know, we're now having to look more and more into our bank accounts. I'm having to, you know, the week before payday comes along, you know, I'm having to budget that a lot more.
In the last independent pay review, NHS workers were given on average a 4% pay rise. Amidst high inflation, the Royal College of Nursing says that's not enough. Sandy is from the union. She says they won't back down until the government negotiates on pay.
We don't want to end it without negotiations, and you know, we will continue. Our mandate is until the end of May for us to be able to strike, and you know, as it stands at the moment, we would go back out to ballot our members at the end of May to see if they wanted to continue striking if nothing's been brought to the table.
Nurses have agreed exemptions, like covering chemotherapy and dialysis, but the strikes are hurting an already troubled health service. Newly announced action by NHS colleagues in the ambulance service will fall on the same day in February as nursing strikes. The challenges for both the NHS and the government are great. Health Secretary Steve Barclay.
Well, I want to work constructively with the trade unions in terms of the pay review body process. Those are the discussions we have. That is a constructive way that I and other ministers are engaging with our respective trade unions. But ultimately, we need to act in the interests of the patient.
Frozen in place, it appears that this dispute will outlast winter. Will Hollis for GB News in Derby.
Well, joining us now is the political editor of the Daily Express, Sam Lister. Good morning, good to see you. Look, this February the 6th joint action between the ambulance workers, between the nurses, is going to be the worst day of striking in the NHS's history, and there will be legitimate concerns about how they'll cope, how patients will suffer as a result.
Yeah, health leaders have raised concerns. They're saying clearly that this will put immense pressure on the NHS. It's already under great strain. I mean, every winter it's under great strain, isn't it? But particularly this year because of COVID and the flu, it is under pressure. And obviously, having two separate walkouts on the same day will cause problems for the NHS, but it will have an impact on patients.
And yet the Health Secretary ruling out yesterday a 10% deal with nurses, which will be hugely disappointing for them.
It really is, and I think the Royal College of Nursing, they really felt like they'd come forward with a kind of olive branch. They were willing to kind of meet him halfway was their phrase, but he yesterday blew that out of the water and said that 10% negotiation point is not going to happen. I think what is interesting though, you do see this softening of language. So the Health Secretary has made this very clear distinction between striking nurses, and he says they've behaved very responsibly during this action by putting in minimum levels of cover, and the ambulance workers, and so they've made this very kind of, that the nurses are doing their best to protect patients, and they kind of have a bit of a dig at the ambulance workers for not being quite as
and call handlers, of course, are involved in this dispute too. So I did see there is some fear now that it hasn't happened thus far, but there could be deaths now caused as a result of this combined action, particularly with ambulance workers and the call handlers not responding.
And it's very difficult because obviously the Prime Minister is trying to look tough here. He wants to show we don't give in to the union demands, but actually when actually people's lives are kind of being, well, not necessarily put in danger, because let's be clear, these are not emergency operations, but certainly people's health is kind of being put into the mix in all this. You would think that there'd be a kind of desperation to get this sorted quite quickly, but that isn't really kind of coming across.
Yeah, and that definitely was the thrust of the ding-dong between Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak at PMQs yesterday. We talk about, if I called an ambulance now, how long would you expect? And, that has traction with the general public, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it was actually quite a powerful moment from Keir Starmer because obviously it's very Yarbu in the chamber on a day of PMQs, and actually the Tory MPs were jeering him, and then it got to the point where he actually said, look, a young woman died waiting for an ambulance, and there was complete silence in the chamber because clearly nobody wants to be the person jeering at that point, and it was quite powerful.
How comfortable or uncomfortable, perhaps I should ask, are Tory MPs who you speak to privately in the Commons about the fact the government is now in a long, protracted dispute with nurses who people still regard as angels,
Yeah.
The public is on the nurses' side, no doubt.
There's definitely a kind of split in opinion within the party. So some MPs are very clear that all unions, the Prime Minister should be tough with all unions and, be very clear that they can't have massive pay demands at this time. But then you speak to other Tory MPs and they are very clear that actually, if you've got public opinion against you on something, just get it sorted quickly. Don't drag this out. This is not good luck for anybody. People will ultimately blame the government. So there is a bit of a split of opinion on it, and I think that's probably makes it more difficult for the Prime Minister, really.
All of that being said, every percentage pay increase is hugely costly for the Treasury, and yet there are calls from within the Conservative Party to start talking again about cuts to tax in the upcoming budget. Legitimate arguments, because obviously it's not going to be easy to be re-elected when you've got the highest tax burden in 70 years.
Yeah.
What's the kind of, realistic chance of that happening?
I think it's difficult to see tax cuts coming soon because it's only a few months since the Chancellor gave his first budget and was quite clear that that the economy was in a bit of a state. He needed to put taxes up, and we've got the biggest tax burden since World War II. Now, with Conservative MPs, obviously they want tax cuts quite desperately. They're also actually, even the ones who are very supportive of Rishi Sunak, they don't necessarily believe he's got a chance of winning, but they feel like, actually, if you haven't got a chance of winning, you might as well just go all out and be bold. And why is he being so timid on these things? So I think there is a sense of frustration even amongst his supporters in the party. If you have only got 18 months, 2 years left, just go for it. Stop being so timid.
And yet we're expecting also at the next 2 weeks' time, when the Bank of England looks at interest rates, they're going to go up again, we think.
4%. Yeah.
4%.
Yeah.
And people are coming out of fixed-term mortgages.
Yeah.
This is a lot of my mates.
Yeah.
They're hundreds of pounds more
Yeah.
they've got to find,
Yeah.
and their pay's not going up as much.
Absolutely. And, people understand that public sector workers are feeling pain because they're feeling it too. And I suppose it depends on your own position as to how sympathetic you are, isn't it, really? And that is the gamble the government's taking.
Yeah, I love how, people do understand that, and then yet you have the Chancellor mansplaining with a cup of coffee about how inflation worked yesterday. Shouldn't snicker. Do you know what? I actually thought the same when Rishi Sunak put out a public statement the week before. It was sort of a little bit patronising.
Yeah.
We're not stupid. We do understand that things are tough at the moment, and we know that you're really clever, but they need some better PR advice.
I think so,
They're
they're not
too clever sometimes.
Yeah, that's
they?
it. They overthink these things.
Sounds so scripted, and there was Jeremy Hunt fiddling around with all these polystyrene cups or something to try and tell us about prices going up and how much it's going to cost for a cup of coffee. He won't know how much a cup of coffee costs.
He's probably not bought his own coffee for a long time, I would have thought.
Interesting that James Dyson's weighed into all of the discussions. He's very critical of Downing Street. He's saying that this is COVID inertia, that growth's become a dirty word, that, has he got a leg to stand on? He did disappear to Singapore for a while because he didn't want to pay taxes.
Yeah, this is the problem for James Dyson, isn't it? That actually people who are opposed to his views will always just say, well, you you went off and, you were a big advocate of Brexit, and actually what did you do? You kind of shipped out a little bit. So he's always slightly undermined by that. But actually the point stands, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And there are, even though Liz Truss's premiership blew up spectacularly, a lot of the things she stands for, a lot of Conservatives want, they really want that the focus on growth. And actually, for Rishi Sunak, he's got 3 former Prime Ministers sitting behind him, 2 of whom are troublemakers, let's be honest about it. And so I think if he doesn't start to focus on growth, there's going to be a lot of kind of pressure from Boris Johnson and Liz Truss to, hold his feet.
Nobody will care what she thinks.
Possibly Liz Truss doesn't have the massive support group that Boris Johnson does, but I think between them, they could be quite...
And Theresa May's not been exactly supportive from the backbenchers.
No. Although she's a little bit more circumspect in her interventions than Boris.
Right, Sam, thank you so much for your analysis. Appreciate that. We want to interrupt that to bring you some breaking news this morning. We are hearing that Manchester Airport has had to close both of its runways. This is following what they describe as heavy snowfall. They urged people that health and safety is their top priority. Operations will resume as soon as they can, and passengers are being advised to contact their airline for the most up-to-date flight information.
And it's going to get worse because the Met Office is warning of snow and ice across much of the country this morning. So we're hoping to talk to travel editor Simon Calder. There he is. Morning, Simon.
Good morning to you. Oh, my goodness. Here we are again. People will be looking back about 30 days or so to the last closure of Manchester Airport due to snowfall. That was around the 10th of December. And here we are again. Unfortunately, yes, the diversions have already started. I'm just looking here. Flights coming in from New York on Aer Lingus. That's in Birmingham. If you're waiting for somebody coming in from Qatar on Qatar Airways, well, they're in Birmingham too. And Cathay Pacific's flight from Hong Kong, that's now in London. And that gives you some idea of the mess that this is going to create later, because, of course, all of those flights due to go out somewhere else. Takeoffs have been halted. And yes, well, exactly as you predicted, Andrew, it's going to get worse before it gets better. What we will see is an awful lot of people building up in the terminals, unable to get anywhere. It could well be, of course, that even once the runways are open, and they say that they're working at pace to clear them, then we will find that, unfortunately, maybe there's some diversions because there simply isn't room to put those planes. And in any event, once you start getting planes and pilots and cabin crew in various parts of the UK, that's not a great look. Last time, I don't wish to be alarmist about this, but we saw some planes diverted as far as Paris and Amsterdam.
Well, Simon, why are we unable to deal with a little bit of snow? How difficult is it to get an airplane up and down when they're already flying through all sorts of conditions and clouds and all the rest of it? Doesn't seem like rocket science.
Great question. Absolutely. And it's all to do with adhesion on the runway and safety. Now, aviation, thankfully, is incredibly safe. But the crucial thing is that any airport, including places like Anchorage, Alaska, and Chicago O'Hare and Moscow and all these other very wintry places, they have problems when it's actually, there's been heavy snowfall. It takes a while to clear them. Furthermore, they have the very, very high investment in a lot of machinery to clear the snow, and everywhere, and not every winter, but many winters we see that this sort of problem arises, and it's really down to the airlines, the airports, to say, OK, we're going to invest what we think is the right amount, but maybe we'll have some problems sometime. Meanwhile, the airlines are going to be furious because Manchester Airport is saying, oh, you've got a problem, talk to your airline. The airlines are going to be paying a fortune as a result of this, because let me tell you what your rights are. If you are waiting for a flight and it doesn't go, it's cancelled completely, and I'm fear we will see quite a number of those today, then the airline has to get you to your destination as soon as possible, including booking a flight on another airline. Say you were flying from Manchester to Paris and EasyJet can't go, well, they've got to buy you a ticket on Air France. So very expensive for the airlines. They've also got to pay your meals and, if necessary, accommodation until they can get you where you need to be. And I can absolutely guarantee if you're going to be diverting planes to Birmingham, to Heathrow, that is going to rack up many, many thousands of pounds in costs for the airlines. But remember, the airline has to get you where you need to be.
Simon, just briefly, it's not just the airlines. There's a problem too if you're trying to get a ferry, because for once it's not the strikes here, strikes in France.
Yes, so we've got this National Day of Action protesting against Emmanuel Macron's plan to increase the pension age from 62 to 64. They're closing down an awful lot of things, including the port of Calais. Now, my understanding, but please check before you travel, is that actually Dunkirk is still open. That goes from Dover as well. And, of course, the tunnel, Eurotunnel, is still operating. Meanwhile, I believe that Eurostar train services from Paris to London and back are going normally. But of course, once you get to Paris, your problems might only just be beginning.
Don't know. Thank you so much for keeping us up to date on the situation in Manchester and indeed in France. We appreciate your time.
Now let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
The government has announced £2 billion for 100 levelling up projects in the UK. The money will go towards better transport links, community regeneration and restoring local heritage sites. And we will be speaking to the Levelling Up Secretary, or is it Gauging Up now? Michael Gove. That's at 9:20 this morning.
And this is a surprise. Jacinda Ardern has announced she's quitting as the Prime Minister of New Zealand next month, saying she hasn't got enough in the tank to lead the country anymore. She's just 42. She's stepping down as Labour leader by the 7th of February. There'll be a vote to replace her, and then there'll be a general election in October.
And the King has requested the profits from a £1 billion a year Crown Estate wind farm deal to be used for the wider public good. The money usually goes towards the sovereign grant.
Now, do you dread your car's MOT? Because drivers could be allowed to delay their MOTs for new vehicles by a year. It's under government proposals to cut costs as part of the cost of living crisis. But is it enough? And is it safe? Let's speak to the founder of the Fair Fuel UK campaign, Howard Cox. Morning to you, Howard.
Good morning, Andrew.
Is this a good idea? Because some people think, don't you need to have your car MOT'd every year because of the safety aspects?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, first of all, this is sticking plaster economics. So we're getting used to this from this government. The highest tax drivers in the world, we're paying the highest at the pumps because of opportunistic profiteering. None of that's being addressed here. He's talking about saving us about £55 a year. I've always said that an MOT should be based on how far you drive, on mileage rather than time. But I don't understand what this announcement's about. I mean, in terms of a cost of living crisis, this is not going to touch the sides.
What you would prefer, Howard, to see is something you've been campaigning for a long time, a substantial cut in fuel duty?
Absolutely right. I mean, I would like to see, three major things from our campaign, which we're working hard on, and that is a serious cut in fuel duty, Andrew, as you know. And we're being threatened with one that's 23% increase in fuel duty, round about 14.5 pence with the VAT added to the fuel duty in the March budget. We're fighting like mad, and I'm glad Labour have suddenly woke up and actually insisting that it should be frozen again. So that was a big surprise. And secondly, the opportunistic profiteering. We still need this body, this consumer price watchdog, what we call Pump Watcher. I've written a proposal on Jeremy Hunt's request to see how it would work. I haven't heard anything back yet. We sent it to him way before Christmas. We look forward to hear what he's going to do with that. And the final thing, of course, is the uncertainty because of we're being forced into electric vehicles for the 2030 diesel new sales of new car sales ban that's coming into only 6 years away. And fundamentally, the government, talking about cutting 55 quid off for an MOT in terms of saving costs is completely stupid.
And stupid it may be in your view, Howard, of course, but if you're a garage owner, this is your bread and butter, isn't it, the MOT? Is this going to lead to the closure, possibly, of some smaller garages, do you think?
I think the MOT type only stations who don't do much servicing, etc. But the point is, I don't think it's a huge loss for most garages. The important thing here is if we want to talk about safety, let's talk about if you drive 100,000 miles a year, you should be having an MOT every year. If you drive 10,000 miles a year, perhaps you should have an MOT every 5 years. That's the sort of thing we're usually reminded of, for a service by our garages that you're due for a service in 3,000 miles. Maybe that's the way we should be doing it based on mileage. That would be the safest thing to do. But this is not. It's really, under a cloud of saving in terms of helping the cost of living. That's the dishonesty in this.
There is I think somebody warned, didn't they, yesterday in the House of Commons, this could create death traps on wheels because some people will be looking for any excuse not to MOT their car, even if it is an old banger.
Absolutely right. The point is, I think it was Boris Johnson wanted to do it every 2 years. I think that was going too far because modern technology, modern cars, they really are really very safe, etc. But if you drive a long way and you're doing a lot of braking and you're doing a lot of, in terms of tyre wear, in terms of brake wear, brake pad wear, all that sort of thing, that's got to be checked. And you're absolutely right, Andrew. I mean, this could cause a lot of problems and it will affect safety. So I just think they should leave it alone and instead cut fuel duty. That's what every driver wants.
I think a lot of people are cheering you this morning, Howard. That's Howard Cox, who is, of course, the founder of Fair Fuel UK. Thanks so much for joining us.
Just talks a lot of sense.
He does. Now, I don't have a car. I haven't had a car
correct.
for a very long time, living in central London, but I think I'd get my car MOT'd every year.
Yeah, well...
Would you?
I'd go by the miles rather than the age.
By the miles,
yeah.
exactly.
Right, after the break, we've got the sport. Paul Coit as Man United draw with Crystal Palace. Details in a sec. Yes.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel. Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other pay-per-review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back at 7:27, still to come on the programme this morning.
Well, at 7:45, we're going to talk about the King's windfall, the hundreds of millions of pounds he's going to put back into the country as a result of a big wind farm development on Crown Estate land.
At 8:20, the celebrity chef, Gokwan's brother, has told us about his new cookbook, One Wok, One Pot, just in time for Chinese New Year on Sunday.
I
couldn't pronounce his name. I bailed out there. Sorry, I'm sorry. I went for Gokwan's brother. I'm
really
so
sorry.
sorry.
I used to have a wok because I used to live in a bedsit and it was perfect because I had one hot plate, so you can cook on just one hot plate.
Yeah, and I saw on. Now, what was his name? Keith Floyd? Was he a bit of a wokker, or have I got that wrong?
He's
anyway,
a drinker.
He used to say he didn't need to clean them because
that's right.
And so that's even better when you're in a bed sit.
This is my early days as a trainee reporter.
There you go.
Yeah,
no need to do the washing up. Probably
a
eat out of it
so
as well.
It's great. Now, don't forget, you can join in any of our discussions. Tell us about your wok experience if you like.
Indeed. All right.
Emailing gbnews at gbnews.uk.
Are you off to Manchester Airport? Are you watching us from Manchester Airport, listening? We want to hear your stories because it's just a nightmare for air passengers
because of
once
snow.
again. Yeah, a few flurries. Let us know.
This this is the exciting bit for Emma and I. Paul Coyte's
Emma?
here.
Who's Emma?
Who's Emma? Who is Emma?
Isn't that Gokwan's sister?
That's
Emma?
exactly it.
Isn't that?
Do you know,
What's her
I suddenly
name?
had visions of your bust-up with...
Emily Thornberry.
But that's Emily.
Yeah, good knows.
Well, anyway,
No,
it's
do you know
too
what
early.
it is? We were talking about Emma Raducanu. And
We were
great.
talking about Emma Raducanu,
That's
who's
what it
out
is.
of the Australian Open, and lovely Paul Coyte.
How are
here
you?
to tell us about
I was
sport.
enjoying the cooking segment, by the way.
Yes.
I was hoping there was going to be more of that.
I'm much more at ease talking about cooking than I am Premier League football or tennis. I like tennis, but I don't like it so much.
And you don't know much about cooking either,
Roger
though, do you?
Federer. I'm quite good at cooking.
OK, fine. All right.
I love tennis,
Stop with the
particularly when Roger Federer was in it. But is Andy Murray playing today?
Andy Murray is Thanasi Kokkinakis is who he's going to be playing today. I thought you may say that, but Australian player, much younger than Andy. But the thing is, because there was bad weather and then he had to play against...
What, in Australia?
Yeah, there's been rain. I mean, there's been incredible heat. Right. And I was talking to someone in Melbourne, actually, today, and he said, we've had to quote Crowded House song, he's had 4 seasons in one day. It's completely changed.
That is what they say about Melbourne, because I went there for a few days on a holiday, and we did get all 4 seasons in a day, and it was very frustrating.
Yeah, and there we are. And that's what they've had anyway. Yeah. So that's the reason that Andy has had an extra day, and then he plays at 9 o'clock today. So after that last game, though, which was just incredible, and he's got 5
set thriller.
It really was. But you know, he always leaves us on the edge of our seat. So it's Kokkinakis today.
Yeah, right.
Kokkinakis.
And Emma Raducanu. And no surprise, Emma Raducanu's out.
Well,
stop.
You know what?
She could spend more time with her modelling contracts.
It's a career in reverse. I don't want to say that because that sounds bad too. And the thing is,
she rolled her ankle.
Everybody seems to say. Nobody wants to say what you've just said there, Andrew, but there has been no success at all since the US Open. And what we're seeing is, well, she had a good go. And, well, she nearly won. She did quite well, and she played Coco Gauff, who is also a very similar age. She's 19 years old.
She lost in straight sets.
But she had a good go, and she nearly did, but how it's going to go...
Right.
You try winning with a rolled ankle.
Exactly.
Shall we talk about, this is what was really exciting this morning, Crystal Palace and Man United.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
This is the big story for you.
Well, Manchester United...
are on a roll.
They are on a roll, but Crystal Palace with a goal right at the death. So we're talking 92nd minute, and it really was. It was an incredible free kick, and so basically Crystal Palace have drawn with Man United, which is then going to affect Manchester United, who people are saying are title challengers. We've got Manchester City, who are playing Spurs tonight. It's a tricky one for me as a Spurs fan and also Tottenham Hotspur fans, because Arsenal are 8 points clear. If Spurs beat Manchester City, which they've tended to do, they've actually won 4 out of 5 games against them, because every team has a bogey team. It's always
Why
over
do
the
Arsenal
years.
fans hate Tottenham so much?
It's local rivalry.
Right.
And Spurs fans have always been very respectful to Arsenal, whereas Arsenal fans have.
But that's because you never win anything.
It's OK. Well, anyway, there's always that rivalry, North London rivalry. So Arsenal are 8 points clear. Manchester City are aiming to get there, but they keep misfiring. So they're playing Spurs tonight to try and close the gap on Arsenal. So it is a huge game tonight.
And what about Manchester City versus Tottenham?
Did you just
about that?
I'm so sorry.
What is this? This is what the next time they play after the one they play tonight. So should things go well tonight, then when they play them again, hopefully it'll go well with that game as well.
Shall we talk about Wales?
In my defence, I was just checking the Manchester airport situation.
Yes, exactly.
Anyway,
well, look, with the Manchester airport situation, the thing is, who knows? Because maybe Spurs will not be able to get there, because I'm glad you brought that up, because of the snow.
Have they not heard of
there's a link.
Well, I don't know.
Trains or coaches, they don't have to fly.
That's always unaffected by weather, isn't it? So that's going to be absolutely
What
fine.
about Wales football team, which did very well? They got to the World Cup. Oh dear, they didn't. But they got there for the first time since, 1958?
We're talking about the money, are we?
They're giving up some of the money, but they have much.
25% the chaps are giving up so that the women can have a 25% pay rise. And, you know, that's
what the Welsh women's football team.
Yeah.
Well, firstly, they should be giving them that anyway. But as far as the men's... When it comes to playing for national teams, the money is not huge because it's more the prestige of playing for.
Well, they get enough from their flipping Premier League.
Of course
clubs.
they do. Of course they do. But what I'm saying is that if they're actually paying money that they would get from the Welsh Football Association, and it's 25% of that, 25% of not very much is even less than that. So we'll see. But it's a nice gesture.
It's the gesture, and it's the message it sends out, and it's just the promotion. You know, obviously with the Lionesses and the success we saw there.
Absolutely.
It's all
do they not get get paid much then? The Lionesses, did they get paid much?
As far as playing for England, it wouldn't be very much. It wouldn't be very much. But again, it would be from the clubs, but the money is going up, and then sponsorship, etc. So they would have done very well.
But women's football can't be paid even a fraction of what these overpaid Premier League players
No,
get.
because at the moment, it's not getting the coverage and the sponsorship, and there's obviously it's something that is growing all the time. So money is going up, and also price tags of players is going up. Again, it's nowhere near what it is with the men's game, but as far as time's concerned, I mean, it's moved a long way in 5 years.
Is women's football as interesting as men's football?
It is.
How you answer it?
Absolutely, Andrew, it is.
Cheeky question.
And it's very much its own way. We could look at it as exactly playing against each other. They wouldn't win, but of course, it's very, very interesting.
There's less Amdram.
You know what?
Fake injuries.
Are we talking about in here, or are we talking about on the football
pitch? Go to a women's match?
I went probably about 5 months ago.
Oh, not bad.
There we go.
And that was a Spurs-Arsenal game at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium.
Right, we need to go. We have to wrap. Thank you so much. Sorry, I just, had to delve out of that very briefly.
Yeah. That's OK, and
Always
I'll let you know how the Spurs-Man City game goes later.
Right,
that's the first one, not the next one.
Yeah, not the next one. We're going to take a very quick break. After that, back with Freddie Gray and Emma Burnell. Another Emma.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison. I'm completely stumped.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing! You remind me of me in the European Parliament.
But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Let's bring you up to date with today's front pages of the newspapers. Here is The Guardian.
Leading with the nurses, of course, and the ambulance workers, unprecedented joint strikes which will take place on February the 6th.
The Mail reports the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt's failing to cut taxes in the upcoming budget. Tory MPs are warning it'll cost them the next election.
Of course it will. And the Express has on its front page King Charles. They describe it as a gift to the nation. He's giving £250 million from a development of wind turbine farms on his estates to tackle the cost of living crisis.
At the Telegraph, running with Sir James Dyson's comments criticising Rishi Sunak and his economic approach, which he says is stupid. Not mincing his words.
Time to go through the papers now. Joining us again this morning, Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, and political consultant, Emma Burnell.
So, shall we start, Emma, with food banks, front of the Mirror. And this is former Chief Secretary to the Treasury and, I believe, Levelling Up Secretary for something like 7 weeks.
He was.
Simon Clarke telling nurses to budget better rather than use food banks. Ouch.
Yeah, I mean, there are two things here. First of all, don't be an idiot, Simon Clarke. You might think that, but what constituency do you think is that you are appealing to when you make statements like that? You just look so out of touch. You know, it's just not the way to make the point that the government might be trying to make about, household budgeting or whatever. We are talking, some nurses are on as low as £20,000. That is given that we're looking at a 10% cost of living increase, that's really hard to cut down from. So I think even if he were to think that people are managing their household finances poorly, why would you, as a leading politician, make those statements publicly? It's just bad politics.
It's bad politics, but is it also not acceptable to say that if you make something free, people will... I mean, I think food bank usage is at a peak, all-time peak, right? Yeah. If food is given out for free, people will come and take it. But no one's allowed to say that.
Well, I think there are... I mean, I wouldn't want to go and have to beg for free food. I think there's a dignity issue that people don't want to have to be using food banks. There might be a really small percentage of people, literally tiny, statistically insignificant percentage of people who will go along and get a free tin of beans. But honestly, the kind of food that you're getting at food bank, this ain't foie gras they're giving out. You know, this is budget food.
And you know this because you do a lot of work with
I do, yeah, absolutely. I've done work with Crisis. I do work with a charity. I cook. I don't do anything clever. I go and cook once a week for a charity. And you get what you're given. You know, these are not... We're not talking about people getting, Marks and Spencer's posh end food. So I think that is a bit of a misnomer, really. And in terms of the debate, we should be looking much more at the vast majority of people who are needing to use food banks and why that's happening in a country as rich as ours.
Freddie, I mean, this is a noise is off that the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, who's not negotiating at the moment with the nurses, this is a noise is off he could do without. Practically.
Well, it's obviously an own goal from Simon Clarke, but I'm going to do a Simon Clarke here and now risk defending him. I think, actually, if you look at what he said, he did not say nurses on 20,000 a year need to budget better, they shouldn't be using... He said, if you're on £35,000... Which a lot of nurses are. It is the average. And you are using food bank, there may be a budgeting issue, which is a different quote to saying, come on, nurses, sort your budget out. But obviously it's a political own goal. It's a gift to the Mirror.
Yeah, but the moment a Tory politician, they call him wealthy. I'm not sure that he is, particularly. He was a solicitor for a few years and then he worked as a political advisor. But the moment a Tory MP, former cabinet minister with a gold-plated pension, appears to talk down to nurses, it's
a silly own goal. I'll give you that. But I mean, I do think, if you're on £35,000 a year and you're using a food bank, there probably is a budgeting issue.
But that's talk to nurses. A lot of them will say that's something to pay for parking when they go to work, or it might have to be...
And they might be...
Well, and also that £35,000 average includes the salaries of senior nurses, and they're not the ones using food banks. So the nurses using food banks are not even likely to be on £35,000. But then, and certainly when you make that average include the much higher salaries, they're definitely not using food banks.
Well, I have to say, we certainly get emails in whenever we interview Secretaries of State on the nurses issue. People do email in saying, don't buy this line that nurses need to go to food banks. So let us know your views on this morning. Do you think that Simon Clarke has put his foot in it, or do you agree with him?
I make a firm prediction here. The Mirror will have an interview with a nurse who goes to a food bank regularly, perhaps a single parent with 3 kids, in Simon Clarke's constituency.
Yeah, of course they will, because why wouldn't they?
Within 24 hours to...
And it will be easy to find.
Yeah.
Right, Freddie, levelling up. We've got Michael Gove on a little bit later on. The Times' front page is talking about how actually the South East is getting more of this levelling up cash than where you would have thought it was most sensibly directed to the Red Wall.
Well, surprise, surprise, the government economic drive is having precisely the opposite effect.
It's funny that.
It wants to have... and it turns out that sort of the South East is getting more money than the Red Wall. Of course, this was a 2019, it was part of the manifesto. Levelling up was very much at the heart of the Johnson agenda. It's obvious that Rishi Sunak is not so keen on it. In fact, his team have been told to say stepping up or gauging up.
I don't get that. We're going to ask Michael Gove.
I thought they said gouging up.
I had to look up the spelling because I was a bit confused.
I think that's how the North feels.
But I mean, if levelling up is a crap slogan, then gauging up's
dire.
Even worse. I do think it was always an ill... It's one of those sort of think tank policy ideas that always sounds good in Westminster, and then when you try and sort of apply it to reality, it starts falling apart.
But I'm just looking at the detailed breakdown. The North East, right slap bang in Red Wall, down from their money's gone down from 5.9 down to 5.2%. Yet the North West down substantially too, and yet London and the South East up massively. Now, of course, a lot of Tory MPs I think great because that's Tory heartland. Well, and there are some poorer seats in the South East. It's not all land of milk and honey.
Well, and I don't think it's
Southwest
I don't think
Cornwall,
it's as
deprived
corrupt
areas.
I don't think it's as corrupt as this, but there is an element to which, you know, are the Tories giving up on some of the Red Wall? Are they thinking, let's shore up the Blue Wall, which may collapse in the south? You know, the ways in it's not as nakedly corrupt as, you know, Tories want to win this seat, so they'll shove in lots of money there. But there's a bias in favour of favouring parts of the country where you want to win power, you want to win back seats or win seats that you already have.
I mean, part of the problem, of course, is the levelling up agenda was supposed to do a very specific thing. It was supposed to invest in communities outside of London and the South East in order to level the economic ability of those areas and to make it easier for people to stay in their areas rather than to have to move to London or Manchester for work. What's actually happened is we've seen, for example, a cut from 41 billion to 26 billion in terms of council funding, and this 2.1 billion has just been put in to allay some of that gap. So you're then seeing this money doing so many more jobs than the original sales pitch for it, which was a very specific, we will change the balance of economic power from the south to the north to make sure that it is more level. And that's not what this money has been completely changed to be more about regeneration and community investment. All of those different things that the government used to do and had much more input in, you know, 10 years ago, because all of those things have been cut away. And there are areas in the South East that do need investment, but they shouldn't be invested from the levelling up pot, which was specifically to do a very, very direct job about the dispersal of economic wealth.
We've only got time for one more story, and I'm just looking down the list and trying to decide what's the best one to end on. I quite fancy this prepay meter scandal just because it's been on the front of the eye now for a couple of days in a row, and I do think it is a huge story. Emma, can you just fill us in on what they're saying today? These are people having their doors knocked down and forcibly having prepay meters.
So what's happened is that 99% of warrants for energy companies who have said are enforcing prepaid meters on people, and to the point where they want to go into their homes forcibly and change their type of meter from the standard meter that most of us have to a prepaid meter. 99% of those warrants are being granted. Some courts are not denying any of these warrants at all.
But why should they have a legal power to force someone to have a prepaid?
Well, I don't think they should. I mean, prepaid meters, the problem with prepaid meters is they are more expensive.
They are.
It's the classic thing of the poverty trap, where the things that you need to buy, because you haven't got a lot of money, cost more in the long run because you have to buy the cheaper option, which runs out quicker. With prepaid meters, I've been on a prepaid meter in the past. You end up sitting in the dark because you just haven't got a fiver to put on the Alecki key.
And, you look at the temperatures today, and we've seen Manchester Airport closed in the snow. You cannot be sitting in the dark with the heating off at the moment. We'll try and do that story in a bit more depth in the next hour. We're out of time, but Freddie and Emma, thank you both very much.
Now, the Princess of Wales is expected to launch a national campaign later this month focused on her decade-long passion for early years development.
Her Royal Highness believes the first 5 years of a child's life have a huge impact on their future chances. And yesterday, Kate visited Fox Cubs Nursery in Luton, and our royal reporter Cameron Walker has more.
How can one small playdate have such a big impact on a child's future? The Princess of Wales believes it's those crucial early years that children learn how to interact with others.
These are vital skills that are going to take them into the next stage of education and also into their later adult lives.
Her Royal Highness visited Fox Cubs Nursery in Luton yesterday, continuing a decade-long passion for supporting very young children. The Princess experienced how this nursery places a huge importance on learning through play, but also at the same time supporting parents to give the children here the best start in life. But it's not all fun and games. Nearly 5,500 early years providers have closed their doors in the last 12 months, according to the Early Years Alliance. The organisation's boss blames a lack of funding.
We've been through a pandemic where many children, frankly, were starved of play, were starved of sharing, etc. So it's not, sort of surprising that we have child development issues. To deprive children effectively of a good education, because this is what the early years is about. It's not just care, it's about educating children. We wouldn't accept that for a 5-year-old. We would not accept that for a 10-year-old. Somehow we'll accept it for the 3- and 4-year-old. So parents are struggling.
And it's not just the parents. Staff don't have to dig far to conclude some children have lost out by being stuck at home. Something Fox Cubs acting manager was keen to share with the Princess.
Things that came up in the conversation were about the impact of COVID and lockdown on children, and all the people that she spoke to pretty much said the same thing, the social and emotional side of things and the communication development, the delay that it's had on children.
The Princess of Wales launched the Royal Foundation for Early Childhood in 2021 and last year visited Denmark to see firsthand how they support the youngest members of society. Her Royal Highness is expected to launch a national campaign focused on early years development later this month. Cameron Walker, GB News, Luton.
Well, we're joined this morning by Vanity Fair's royal correspondent Katie Nicholl. Good morning, lovely to see you. And look, there's Kate on the front of a lot of the papers this morning, flying the flag for the royal family, and also positive headlines for the King as well.
Yes, we're sort of seeing, I think, the royals back to work. Obviously, we've had all the negative headlines over the last week or so with Spare, and clearly it's been dominated by the sort of rival royal court over in California, but now it's back to our British royal court doing what they do best, which is getting back to work, and I think you see that very much with the Princess of Wales. This is a real legacy project for her. This is something that she's been passionate about for years. This intervention into the early years is something that she's long campaigned for. And I just know from my personal experience, whenever I've visited nurseries with her or primary schools, she does have this most wonderful knack, and she seems most at ease when she's with small children, and she loves it, and she's passionate about it, and so for her it would be a delight.
What is her big intervention? Because I know that she is wonderful with children and she cares very much about those early years, but I mean, I feel we've seen this photo op many, many times, and whilst it is great to see her out and about, and she is a mega star for the royals.
Yes.
What's she trying to change?
Well, she's set up her own institution now into this whole arena. So I think you're going to see more of this. But I think where she's sort of moved it on is she's got academics involved, she's got scientists involved. And I think she really believes that if she keeps putting the spotlight on this, she's going to eradicate a lot of issues that come out later in life by intervening now. So this issue isn't going to go away. You're going to continue seeing her going into nursery schools because that's her thing. That's what she wants to do.
Now, great big story, hugely positive publicity for King Charles, have to remember that.
Yes.
6 wind turbine farms going on Crown Estate land. Potentially that would be a £1 billion windfall for his coffers.
Yes.
He's giving a quarter of that back to the Treasury or back to the government.
Yeah, I mean, this is very interesting. It's the front page of the Express. The Mail have got it as well. All of the papers are running with it. I think when you think back to the King's very first Christmas speech, you know, he talked about the crisis of living. He made it very clear that he understood what people are going through. And I think in this era where the monarchy absolutely has to justify its existence, it cannot be seen to be a drain on the taxpayer's purse. So that's why we're seeing Charles spearing up a slimmed-down monarchy and cutting back in that respect. But to actually be giving a huge sum of money back to the British public, I mean, we don't know how it's going to be distributed.
Yeah, that's slightly worrying. I was saying he should write something down because don't trust the government to spend it.
And I think that's what most people will be thinking. OK, well, it's all very well and the good intention coming from the monarchy, but how's this going to be distributed? Because actually, the energy that this will generate will, I think, fuel 7 million homes. So it will make a massive difference. And I think the King is going to be absolutely aware of the fact that that needs to be distributed properly. And also, within this story as well is the suggestion that he wants to lower what he takes back from the sovereign grant. So it's gone up to 25% to finance this huge refurbishment at Buckingham Palace, but he wants it to drop back to 15%. And I think all of that is going to make people think, OK, well, if that's the case and they're not being greedy, is the monarchy good value for money? Yes, it costs 110 million a year, but actually, when you break that down, I'm not quite sure of the exact figure. But it's under £2.
And we think the coronation is not going to be perhaps as lavish as some people thought.
Yes, I mean, I think that listen. When you speak to the palace, they make it very clear that it's not going to skimp on pomp and pageantry. You're going to have a wonderful spectacle.
That's what they're great at.
Of course, and that's what people want to see. And for most people, this will be the very first coronation that they will see in their lifetime. So it's important. It puts Britain on the world stage, but it doesn't need to be a sort of long drawn-out affair with unnecessary hangers-on and costing what it did, perhaps, for the Queen's coronation back in 53.
It was over 3 hours, wasn't it? Nearly 4 hours.
It's not going to be as long.
It was, and
no one has
that attention
appetite.
span, quite frankly. In an age of Instagram and TikTok and everything else, no one's going to watch for hours and hours. But they want to tune in and they want to see a pomp and pageantry and a spectacle, and you will see that. But in terms of the cost, it is going to be scaled back because, again, I just think the monarchy knows that it cannot be seen to be draining the public purse. It will get criticised and attacked for doing so.
You've got 30 seconds, Katie. Just one quick word on America's continued fixation with Lady Di.
Well, this is Kim Kardashian, isn't it? And she has spent £160,000 on a piece of jewellery that was once worn by Princess Diana. It's a Garrard piece. Diana wore it on quite a few occasions, and I think it just goes to show the value of the royals, the impact of Diana, and if you're Kim Kardashian, I mean, what's £160,000, eh?
Yeah, exactly.
Peanuts to her.
Exactly. First of all, it was Madonna. Now she wants to emulate Lady Di.
Yeah.
Always lovely to see you, Katie Nicholl. Thank you so much for that. We're going to take a quick break. After that, we'll have all the latest for you on the biggest strikes in the NHS history.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
The NHS faces the biggest day of industrial action in its history next month as nurses continue striking today.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Thursday, January the 19th. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel Webster and Andrew Pearce.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Patients face unprecedented disruption in the health service in February, with ambulance and nursing staff staging joint walkouts. It comes as thousands of nurses begin a second consecutive day of strike action.
And the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, no surprise here, says no tax cuts in his next budget, according to Treasury insiders at least. Tory MPs have reacted with predictable anger. Former party leader Ian Duncan-Smith says not cutting taxes could cost the party the next general election.
The King has asked for the profits from a £1 billion wind farm deal to be used for, and I quote, the wider public good. That's instead of entering the coffers of the monarchy. It comes after His Majesty highlighted the anxiety and hardship of the cost of living crisis in his Christmas message.
What this job takes, and I know that I no longer have enough in the tank to do it justice. It's that simple.
And a big surprise there, Jacinda Ardern, she's announced her resignation as Prime Minister of New Zealand. She's only 42. She's going to stand down no later than February the 7th, or carry on as an MP until the election in October.
And as always, we would love to hear from you on any of the topics of the day. Send in your thoughts via Twitter or email. And don't forget, let us know where you're watching or listening from.
Well, the NHS is facing its worst day of strike action in its long history, with ambulance and nursing staff staging joint walkouts next month.
It comes as a second day of nursing strikes kicks off across 55 trusts in England. Patients could again face disruption to operations and appointments, though emergency care will continue.
And a 24-hour strike by the Welsh Ambulance Service also begins today, with another walkout scheduled for Monday.
Well, our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis joined the nurses' picket line in Derby yesterday and has the story.
Under the watchful eye of history's most famous health worker, Florence Nightingale, the nurses of the present fight for the future of their profession. Ellie has joined the picket here in Derby. She works in the community.
Me personally, I can't do the kind of nursing that I want to do, the kind of nursing that I trained to do, and the reason that I came to the job. You're rushing around, you finish work at the end of the day feeling like you haven't done a good job for your patients. When it's right, it's the most rewarding job in the world, and that's why we do it, and that's why we're here fighting for a better profession, for people to want to do the job, so there's enough of us to provide really good care.
There are picket lines like this one in Derby across the country, and it doesn't really matter where you go because you'll hear the same answers from the nurses, that this strike is about pay and working conditions, because it seems that you can't improve one without doing something about the other. Sam has worked in the NHS for 13 years. He may be outnumbered by his female colleagues, but he's facing the same financial challenges.
Everything's going up. You know, we're now having to look more and more into our bank accounts. I'm having to, you know, the week before payday comes along, you know, I'm having to budget that a lot more.
In the last independent pay review, NHS workers were given on average a 4% pay rise. Amidst high inflation, the Royal College of Nursing says that's not enough. Sandy is from the union. She says they won't back down until the government negotiates on pay.
We don't want to end it without negotiations, and you know, we will continue. Our mandate is until the end of May for us to be able to strike, and you know, as it stands at the moment, we would go back out to ballot our members at the end of May to see if they wanted to continue striking if nothing's been brought to the table.
Nurses have agreed exemptions, like covering chemotherapy and dialysis, but the strikes are hurting an already troubled health service. Newly announced action by NHS colleagues in the ambulance service will fall on the same day in February as nursing strikes. The challenges for both the NHS and the government are great. Health Secretary Steve Barclay.
Well, I want to work constructively with the trade unions in terms of the pay review body process. Those are the discussions we have. That is a constructive way that I and other ministers are engaging with our respective trade unions. But ultimately, we need to act in the interests of the patient.
Frozen in place, it appears that this dispute will outlast winter. Will Hollis for GB News in Derby.
Well, joining us now is political correspondent Tom Harwood, who's in the studio with us this morning. Look, this day on the 6th of February is going to be very, very worrying for patients. Health leaders saying they have grave concerns and piling the pressure on government. But yet we have the Health Secretary yesterday ruling out 10% deal with nurses.
Yes, to be fair, I think the nurses have also said they'd be willing to go in for less than 10% now. But obviously there is still this big argument that is around this idea as to whether or not inflation is embedded in the long term. This is what the government has been saying for a long time now, and we saw yesterday with those inflation figures down very slightly, but still in double digits. The idea is that if there's big double-digit pay increases given across the public sector, that would actually embed price rises for longer. Now, the opposition to that, of course, is that people are struggling under the price rises as things stand, and being told that inflation will come down if they're paid less isn't really much consolation for that. So it's a big battle that is still going on, but there is a bit of a change in terms of how the government has approached it in the last few weeks, meeting with these unions. We saw lots of roundtable discussions just a couple of weeks ago in almost every sector, and it does look like in some sectors there is sort of movement. Perhaps we're edging close to a deal on the railways, although certainly when it comes to the health service, it does look a little bit further away.
And there's much less sympathy with the public, Tom, with the railway workers, and particularly after that catastrophic interview with the head of ASLEF yesterday. I had to admit that train drivers have done rather well, actually, in the last decade, way above the inflation.
Certainly, and of course the amount of taxpayer funding that went in through the railways over the pandemic added to the fact that commuting across the railways is massively down, more than 40% down on where it was before. Less money to pay higher salaries. Clearly they need to find efficiency savings somewhere, and that's the argument that's been going on. I think the public understands that. But when it comes to the NHS, of course, there's this sort of instinctive compassion towards those who make us better.
But do you sense there's cabinet unity completely 100% on standing firm against the nurses?
I think that they wouldn't want to see it as standing firm against the nurses. They'd be wanting to see this as more of a negotiation. And I think there has been some goodwill between the RCN and the government, particularly when it comes to enacting minimum levels of safety during these strikes. The RCN has agreed to enact these minimum safety levels that will actually be legislated for, and we've seen that go through its first hurdle in Parliament this week. But interestingly, the ambulance drivers refused to negotiate with the government to offer that minimum level of safety during a strike. And that's one of the big reasons why we're seeing this new legislation come through Parliament starting this week. They want the ambulance drivers to behave more like the nurses.
OK, well, don't go anywhere, Tom. We'll come back to you because we've got more politics to discuss in just a moment. But we want to pop to Lancashire now and speak to our North West of England reporter, Sophie Reaper. Good morning. Tell us where you are today, Sophie, and what's happening there.
Well, a very good morning to you both. I'm here at Webster Hospital in Merseyside, where yesterday they had about 100 nurses on the picket line. We're expecting a similar turnout today. And joining me now is Hilary, who's a staff nurse here at this hospital. She's going to talk to us a little bit about what's going on. Hilary, why are you on strike today?
Well, I've been nursing for 40 years and I have never seen it so bad. The understaffing, the underfunding, you've got newly qualified staff nurses who are burnt out. You go around the wards, COVID was bad enough, but it's worse. Boris, for all their clapping, it's done nothing. These poor nurses, they've got their futures ahead of them. If it carries on the way it is, we haven't got an NHS, we haven't got nurses. If you don't invest in us, then I don't know what we're going to do, because it has never, ever been this bad.
It seems to be going back and forth now between the RCN and Steve Barclay. What needs to happen?
The government needs to get their act together. They need to stop ignoring what's going on. I mean, how many people have to die? How many nurses have to leave before they actually do something? Because I tell you now, Boris, when you needed an ITU bed, when you had COVID, what if that ITU bed isn't there?
Absolutely. And, it isn't just about pay, though, is it? It's so much more than that. Talk to me about what else it's about.
It's about the future of nursing, the future of our patients, patient safety, having staffed wards, properly staffed wards with staff that are qualified and are supported in the roles that they're doing. Because if we don't support these staff and invest the money in more nurses, more equipment, more everything, more doctors, it's not just nurses, it's the doctors, it's our allied health professionals, it's our HCAs, our domestics, our porters. We all need investment because we have nothing without all of this.
We know now that there's going to be another 2 strike days coming in February. How much longer can this go on for?
Till they listen to us.
Fair enough. Thank you so much for your time this morning, Hilary. We're going to be here at Webster Hospital now for the rest of the morning, seeing what's going to happen on this picket line and ongoing strikes with the nurses.
Thank you, Sophie Reaper, up there in the northwest. Now, Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer predictably clashed over the ongoing NHS strikes during yesterday's Prime Minister's questions. Specifically, it was about ambulance waiting times. Here's a reminder.
If they were in Northampton, it wouldn't arrive until 2:20. If they were in Plymouth, it wouldn't arrive until 2:50. That's why someone who fears a heart attack waiting more than 2.5 hours for an ambulance. Not the worst case scenario, just the average wait. So for 1 week, will he stop blaming others, take some responsibility, and just admit under his watch, the NHS is in crisis, isn't it?
Mr. Speaker, I noticed the one place the honourable gentleman didn't mention was Wales, where we know ambulance times are even worse than they are in England, Mr. Speaker. No, and the reason that is the case, because this is not about politics. This is about the fact that the NHS in Scotland, in Wales, in England is dealing with unprecedented challenges, recovering from COVID, dealing with a very virulent and early flu season, and everyone is doing their best to bring those wait times down.
Well, our national reporter Paul Hawkins is in Cardiff this morning as ambulance workers there prepared to take to the picket line. We should point out, actually, the Prime Minister failing at the dispatch box when he was popping back at Sir Keir Starmer, that he was talking about the failures of the NHS in Wales, which is run by Labour, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of why this dispute here, from a Welsh perspective, has turned into a bit of a political football, because here the Welsh Government, the Labour Government, have offered an extra £1,000 on top of the average 4.75% NHS staff pay rise. But union members here, they don't want that. They want incremental pay rises, not a one-off £1,000. And they do have, speaking to Unite members behind me, they do have sympathy with the Welsh Government and indeed with their employers. And their gripe is really with the UK Government, who they say are not giving enough money to the Welsh Government in the first place. The Welsh Government are saying, look, we need more money from the UK Government, but number 10, as you heard there, would say, we've given you your allocation of money. If you want to pay your staff more, then you're going to have to find the money from within the existing health budget, because there simply isn't enough money to go around. But this one today, this ambulance strike, is the first in Wales by the union Unite. We've already had one by GMB, but the first one by Unite. There are 23 picket lines around Wales today. Takes in about 1,000 members, and here we call them Category 1 calls, don't we? In England, here in Wales, they call them red calls. They will answer red calls. We've just seen one ambulance heading out, and some of the people behind me on the picket line have got their overalls on behind them. So if they do need to be called to life-threatening emergencies, they will attend those calls.
OK, Paul, thank you very much indeed.
Tom Harbour's still here with us. Tom, that was a bit of a miss by the Prime Minister, wasn't it, at the dispatch box? The Tory MPs are cheering, but people watching thinking, what's the significance of Wales?
Yes, he did mention this a few times, and actually, I'm not sure if it came across on the television, but in the chamber, throughout the exchange, people behind the Prime Minister just kept shouting, Wales!
Yeah.
Wales! At almost every opportunity. The Prime Minister, I think, did say it is run by Wales, but only after a few questions. It is run by the Labour Party, but only after a few questions. And I think there were some good sort of technocratic answers from the Prime Minister there. The leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer, saying, how long is our waiting list? How long do you wait for an ambulance? Again and again and again. And the Prime Minister came back saying, we're doing this, we're doing that, we've put this much money into this extra beds. And he had a number of technical answers. But at the end of the day, it was the emotional appeal from Sir Keir Starmer saying, referencing a 25-year-old lady who sadly passed away waiting for an ambulance. And no matter how much money Rishi Sunak wants to talk about has gone into the NHS, no matter how many more extra beds or what's being done to sort of solve that, ultimately the emotional appeal from Sir Keir Starmer trumped perhaps the more technocratic facts from Rishi Sunak.
Interesting you're talking about his technocratic credentials. Are the Tory party falling out of love with them? Are we seeing a return, perhaps, of calls for a bit more Trussonomics?
Well, it's interesting. The growth group of Conservative MPs has formed this week. It met 2 evenings ago.
Liz Truss was there.
Liz Truss was there. It's led by 2 of her former cabinet ministers, Ranil Jayawardena and Simon Clarke, who were both the DEFRA secretary and the Levelling Up secretary under Liz Truss. And interestingly, it spans a great number of people across the party, more than 40 MPs, and that's enough to wipe out the Conservatives' majority if it comes to votes, because, of course, one Conservative MP voting the other way, you get around a majority of 80 that way, 40 doubling maths. But crucially, this spans people around the party. There are people who entered Parliament in 1987 in this group. There are people who entered Parliament in 2019 in this group. And it will be acting as they want to say they want to help the government to pursue pro-growth policy, but it'll also put a lot of pressure on the Prime Minister, who has abandoned so many elements of the pro-growth reform, not just tax cuts, but also supply-side reform, childcare reform, planning reform, migration reform, all the big things that Liz Truss never got around to even announcing. Have now been ditched by Rishi Sunak. And there are lots of MPs who think, well, we might well lose the next general election, but we might as well do something with the next year and a half while we have it.
Yeah, they don't appear to be doing very much at all, do they?
Well, I think there are some areas where the government would come back and say, look, we've united the Conservative Party around particularly minimum service, minimum safety levels.
Yeah.
There's the retained EU law bill that, of course, went through its later stage in Parliament last night.
Rebellion that didn't happen.
Not a significant rebellion at all. And
despite
David Davis's best efforts,
to get rid of about 4,000 EU rules and regulations, Tom, which were just nodded through by the British Parliament.
Certainly, there's a huge amount of backlogged EU law that never got a vote in Parliament, never got much scrutiny, came through by diktat, by fiat, from the European Commission. However, there are still more hurdles for this law, of course. We know the House of Lords does not have a majority of Conservative peers. There's a majority of opposition peers in the House of Lords, most of whom are not predisposed towards liking Brexit very much. And so there'll be a lot of hurdles for this piece of legislation to get through the upper house.
OK, Tom Harwood, thank you very much indeed.
Well, let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
The government's announced £2 billion for 100 levelling up projects in the UK. The money will go towards better transport links, community regeneration and restoring local heritage sites. And we'll be asking the Levelling Up Secretary, Michael Gove, more about this in around 20 minutes' time.
And a big surprise here. Jacinda Ardern has announced she's quitting as the Prime Minister of New Zealand next month, saying she hasn't got enough in the tank to lead the country anymore. She's only 42. She's stepping down as Labour Party leader next month, with a vote to determine her replacement shortly after. There'll be a general election in October.
Manchester Airport has temporarily closed both runways due to heavy snow. The Met Office has issued yellow snow and ice warnings for Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales as bitterly cold temperatures continue to grip the UK.
And the Princess of Wales is to launch a national campaign later this month focused on her decade-long passion for early years development.
Yesterday, Kate visited Fox Cubs Nursery in Luton and our royal reporter Cameron Walker follows the story.
How can one small playdate have such a big impact on a child's future? The Princess of Wales believes it's those crucial early years that children learn how to interact with others.
These are vital skills that are going to take them into the next stage of education and also into their later adult lives.
Her Royal Highness visited Fox Cubs Nursery in Luton yesterday, continuing a decade-long passion for supporting very young children. The Princess experienced how this nursery places a huge importance on learning through play, but also at the same time supporting parents to give the children here the best start in life. But it's not all fun and games. Nearly 5,500 early years providers have closed their doors in the last 12 months, according to the Early Years Alliance. The organisation's boss blames a lack of funding.
We've been through a pandemic where many children, frankly, were starved of play, were starved of sharing, etc. So it's not, sort of surprising that we have child development issues. To deprive children effectively of a good education, because this is what the early years is about. It's not just care, it's about educating children. We wouldn't accept that for a 5-year-old. We would not accept that for a 10-year-old. Somehow we'll accept it for a 3- and a 4-year-old. So parents are struggling.
And it's not just the parents. Staff don't have to dig far to conclude some children have lost out by being stuck at home. Something Fox Cubs acting manager was keen to share with the Princess.
Things that came up in the conversation were about the impact of COVID and lockdown on children, and all the people that she spoke to pretty much said the same thing, the social and emotional side of things and the communication development, the delay that it's had on children.
The Princess of Wales launched the Royal Foundation for Early Childhood in 2021 and last year visited Denmark to see firsthand how they support the youngest members of society. Her Royal Highness is expected to launch a national campaign focused on early years development later this month. Cameron Walker, GB News, Luton.
Now, after the break, we're going to be learning some one-pot recipes. We can't wait. From the celebrity chef, Kwok Lin Wan.
Yeah, so a one pot in a wok. I already thought it was a one pot thing, a wok.
Exactly, but that's the great thing about a wok. When I was a poor training reporter,
you were an expert.
one hot plate. I was a
There you
great
go.
expert on the wok.
All the details after this.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. The time is 25 past 8. Still to come on the programme this morning.
Well, we're going to be speaking later to the Levelling Up Secretary, Michael Gove, who now might be called the Gauging Up Secretary. We'll ask him about that, because the government's announcing more than £2 billion of funding as part of its so-called Levelling Up, Gauging Up scheme.
9:15, if you're a cheese fan or a Corrie fan, be sure to tune in, because we'll be speaking to the actor and chef Sean Wilson about his new cheesy cookbook, Cheddar Gorged. See what he did there?
Hey. And you can join in, of course, any of our discussions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or you tweet us at gbnews.
Now, this Sunday is Chinese New Year, making the end of the year of the tiger and the start of the year of the rabbit.
And if you feel like celebrating with some Chinese cuisine, well, Chef Kwok Lin Wan can be of assistance. He's released a new book, One Wok, One Pot, and he joins us now. Morning.
Good morning.
Tell us about a wok.
Thanks for having me.
No, a pleasure. Tell us about a wok. Some people might not even know what it is.
Okay, so it's a round-bottomed pan that we tend to use when we're cooking Chinese food. It was designed to sit over a fire pit back in 3,000, 4,000 years ago, and it's very thin, so you get a really quick stir fry, so it seals the meats and the vegetables, all the nutrients into it, and it makes food taste fantastic, I think. So
it does make it taste fantastic, and it's sometimes seen as actually quite a healthy option, but is that actually true?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, obviously, we have this misconception that when we go to a Chinese restaurant or takeaway, it becomes fast food. Now, fast food is obviously, most of it is deep fried. When we take that away and we start cooking at home, we can control how much oil, how much sugar, how much salt we put into each of these dishes and still achieve that authentic Chinese taste.
And if you cook some of the recipes in your book, they're quite quick, aren't they? You can cook the meal.
Yeah, I mean,
pretty swiftly.
there are some recipes that literally take 3 or 4 minutes, and then there are others. Like if we look at sort of like some of the one pot recipes that we've got in this new book, they take a little longer because we're braising the meat, so we're sealing them off in a little tiny bit of oil, and then we're and food. So my cousin, who's now taken over from my dad's generation, he's organised a big Chinese New Year party where the whole family get together. We hand out red pockets to the children. He cooks all of the food, and it's just a big celebration where the family get very much like a Christmas day, I guess.
Now, I want you to look... many years ago, I have a confession. When I was a young trainee reporter, I lived in a bedsit, so a wok was brilliant. They were just all the rage back then in the early 1980s, and I had a cookbook. But what's your favourite recipe in your cookbook?
In the new cookbook?
Yeah.
So I love noodles. So any noodle dish, which is perfect again for Chinese New Year because it represents longevity. So actually, it's probably my red curry ramen. It's just a lovely recipe. It's nice and quick. It only takes about 10 minutes or so to cook and prep. And the flavours, and again, it's using ingredients that you can locally buy from pretty much most supermarkets. So there's no faff, which is lovely, I think. So
yeah, absolutely. Minimum faff as well. And so that's your favourite recipe in the book. What's your favourite Chinese cuisine there? I mean, we all have our favourites, probably mostly terribly anglicised, you know, the chow mein or whatever it might be. But what's the what's your genuine favourite?
Okay, so if I'm eating anglicised, I think that's the word, for Chinese food, it's sweet and sour. I love a sweet and sour chicken, Hong Kong style. If I'm going to a good Chinese restaurant, I always have the roast duck, because you can always tell how good the chef is by the roast duck. And dim sum. I love har gao. I love sort of like the king prawn dai har chum fun, and all, so all the steamed baskets. So that's what I remember going out and eating with my family when I was younger. So that's kind of like my comfort food.
Yeah, do you know what? It's only 8:30 in the morning, but you're making me hungry. We have been up for hours, we should say.
Dim sum served for breakfast, so it's fine.
Well, really?
Yeah, it's a breakfast dish.
Is it?
Well, that sounds fabulous.
Perfect. See you after.
Now, I want to know, do you have to wash up the wok after you've used it, or do you, as I was told back in the 80s, you leave it because the oil and all the flavour goes into the wok, the texture of the wok, which improves the flavour of the next meal? What's the truth?
Yeah, so you don't want to scrub your wok. So you obviously clean it with a green scourer, which is absolutely fine. And then what you do, you put it back on the heat and you make sure that all the water has evaporated. Now, I do know some people that put a very, very thin layer of oil on just to keep it. But if it's dry, you shouldn't need to do that. What you're trying to do with a good carbon steel wok is build up a patina, which is that natural non-stick every time you use the wok. And the darker that goes, the more non-stick and the more flavour. So I don't know if you've ever heard of a cooking technique called breath of the wok. And that's where you get that smoky flavour into the food. And sometimes using a non-stick wok, it's very hard to cheat that flavour. But if you're using a good carbon steel wok, you can really get those flavours into the food.
I think Chinese New Year is really something that we're all embracing now. Lots of people will be flocking, I think, to Chinatown in London.
I'm going on Chinatown on Sunday.
Yeah, well, that's perfect, Chinese New Year. And there's little mini Chinatowns now popping up in other big cities around the country. Look, we have to leave it there. We wish you a Happy New Year and a fortuitous year of the rabbit. Kwok Lin Wan, have a lovely day on Sunday, and thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I think I'm going to buy a wok.
Oh, you don't have one?
No.
Oh, I've already got one. I still love a wok,
right.
But I just don't do it very often for the kids. But anyway.
Yeah. Do you have to persuade them hard to eat that?
Well, they're not very good at sort of chilies or strong flavours. Yeah, early days.
Now, after the break, we're going through the papers again with Freddie Gray and Emma Burnell. So stay tuned.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons. I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us. We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 8:36. Time to go through the papers one last time this morning, joined by the Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, and the political consultant, Emma Burnell. Welcome back to both of you. Freddie, should we start with Jeremy Clarkson? You've written about him this week, and indeed The Telegraph talking about him this morning, and his comments about Meghan have no place on ITV.
Yes, well, ITV have said he can do another series of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. But they are making it clear that they find his comments unacceptable. So I'm finding this sort of ritual humiliation of Clarkson quite ironic.
If they find it unacceptable, why are they letting him do another series?
Well, because he's box office.
Because he's box office.
He's very popular.
He is. So he's a great TV presenter.
And I think it's almost sort of in a funny way, because he hasn't actually really been cancelled, but this has sort of raised his profile in a way. I mean, it's obviously been a bad few weeks for him. I thought his daughter rebuking him on Instagram was quite hilarious. I find it very funny when celebrity children try and gain fame from dissing their celebrity parents.
About Prince Harry?
Exactly, that's Prince Harry's the prime.
Oh, we nearly got through a whole episode.
No chance.
Well, I think the point about... let's talk about Prince Harry. Their response to Clarkson's unbelievable grovel, slightly pathetic grovel, I thought, from Clarkson was so graceless.
It was.
What about these ripples of rehabilitation, or what was the word they believed that they were... Well, I can't think of the phrase.
I mean, they're not worried about whether Clarkson's offended them or not. They're worried about, controlling his speech in other areas. They think that their job is... They have a grander vision of themselves than the actual royal family.
They'd like him cancelled.
Emma?
Yeah.
Moving on from Harry and Meghan.
Yeah, Clarkson.
I mean, Jeremy Clarkson shouldn't have said what he said. More importantly, the editor should not have published what he said. And beyond that, I don't think that should affect his contract on ITV if the people who watch his shows still want to watch his shows. If enough people decide that he's not for them, then ITV have every right to say, you're not for us either.
The Piers Morgan lesson, right? They cancelled Piers Morgan over a Meghan complaint, and then they hemorrhaged viewers from his show.
Piers Morgan walked out, though, didn't he? I mean, I think the problem with that was Piers Morgan was acting to Piers Morgan for his boots. And eventually they had to kind of say, look, no one's bigger than the channel. And that is the balance that you have to strike with these big egos, big personalities. No one's bigger than the channel itself. And in fact, a show like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, there was a time when no one could imagine that show without Chris Tarrant. And now, of course, that's not the case. So there will be a time when everyone goes, oh, can you imagine not having Jeremy Clarkson? Well, yes, of course we can, because whoever takes it over, the format's the winner.
And I'm still not clear, is Amazon ending when his contract comes to an end? Is that it? With his...
They're believed to be. I don't think it's been confirmed yet.
Yeah.
But I mean,
I'm told it's a very good programme. I don't watch.
Everybody loves it.
The Farm.
Yeah.
Oh, it's fabulous.
Is it? Yeah.
Is that the one you went the tour?
Yeah, the one on the one on.
Tour.
That's the
Which one was
Petrolhead one.
He's with the Top Gear.
No, that's he's not on that anymore.
The Grand Tour. Yeah. Sorry, catching up.
Yeah.
But no, I think Jeremy Clarkson is good television. I'm not the biggest fan. I'm not that bothered about cars and things. But you like him, don't you?
I thought Clarkson's Farm was glorious. Absolutely fabulous show. It did wonders for the British countryside. He just had a unique... You say that, there's other people that can do it. I don't know anyone that can describe things in such a comical way. How he made it... mundane potato growing entertaining.
Yes. Sure, but the problem is, as I say, no one's bigger than the channel. So you're, and he's not going to last forever. So you've got to be able to have a turnover of talent.
There's such a thing as a star, and as we, I don't want to talk about people on other channels, but the ratings, for example, when Piers Morgan did go, have never been recovered by ITV. So you say that nobody's bigger than the channel. Sometimes they are the ones that sustain the channel.
I mean, they could do with a different star. But you cannot pin the popularity of anything on one. I mean, obviously we can on you, Isabel, and Andrew, of course,
and Eamonn, more important,
and Eamonn, and who I hope is feeling much better.
Yeah.
But essentially, that's not a business model that works for television, and that's what you. Television is ultimately a business. You do have to run it as such. And if someone damages your brand, then you do have to make difficult decisions around that.
It would be a duller place TV without Jeremy Clarkson.
Yeah, I mean, there's another way of looking at it. What happens when kind of wokery, for want of a better word, damages the business model? What happens if you have to get rid of...
Well, that's it. It is about a balance.
Because a small group of people in your company...
And what I would say is that it's not up to John Nicholson who's on telly. It's up to the bosses at ITV, and I don't think John Nicholson writing that letter to ask him to be sacked was helpful.
That's the SNP MP.
The SNP MP.
Why should an MP
should
decide
not
who's on
be
TV?
deciding who's on television. As someone who has very liberal values, probably described by most of your viewers as woke, it's not up to me. It's not up to a political person to say you can or can't be on telly. There are things you should and shouldn't say on TV, but I would make that quite a broad spectrum.
The SNP MP writing that letter actually perversely helps Jeremy Clarkson, because nobody wants to be seen to be responding to a hue and cry from a few politicians, in my view.
Shall we talk about prepayment meters again, Emma? We got into this a little bit last hour and we had to rush it, but it's a really interesting story that the Eye are leading on for the second day in a row. And as you so eloquently described last hour, this is about those people who are sort of at the bottom of society actually ending up paying more in a really tragic sort of set of circumstances?
It's when you live hand to mouth, it's actually more expensive to live that way a lot of the time because you can't buy the higher quality things that last a long time. There's a wonderful analogy on this in Terry Pratchett about boots. You either buy a really good pair of boots for 50 quid that last 10 years, or you buy a really cheap pair of boots for 5 quid that last you 1 year. And you end up paying a lot more for boots over the long term because you're poor.
Yeah. Well, listen, we will have to leave it there and we'll try and get into that a little bit more because we are joined now by the Levelling Up Secretary of State, Michael Gove. Very good morning to you. Joins us from Blackpool this morning. Good to see you. Look, you want to talk about big investments across the country. Tell us what you're in Blackpool for today.
Well, overall, we're spending £2.1 billion on more than 100 projects across this country in order to level up, to make sure that overlooked and undervalued communities get the investment they need in order to improve productivity, bring new jobs. And here in Blackpool, we're spending £40 million in order to create a new university which will help people in this community get high-paying jobs in the future.
Michael, the front page of the Times today reports a lot of the levelling up money is going to the south and southeast. I thought levelling up was all about the northeast and northwest, which have traditionally fared much worse than London and the southeast.
That's true, and actually, if you look at it per capita, the Levelling Up Fund has spent twice as much money in the northwest as it has in the southeast. But there are some communities in the southeast that are deprived and need support. Places like the Kent Coast, Margate, Ramsgate, Sheerness, Folkestone, they're the sorts of places that we do need to support as well. But the majority of cash is going to places like Blackpool, Morecambe, Workington, Copeland, Accrington, Cleethorpes, not places in the southeast and not places that people would think of as particularly privileged.
Were they all Tory marginals you just listed there, Michael Gove?
No, we're also spending money in Wigan. We're spending £20 million in order to invest in Hay Hall, which is a big cultural asset in Wigan. The MP there is Lisa Nandy, my opposite number. So again, the overwhelming majority of money is of course being spent outside London and the southeast. And again, I think it's the case that the majority of cash is going to areas with Labour councils.
It's interesting, though. I mean, we're just looking at the Telegraph's analysis of all of this, and they're quoting Red Wall constituencies like Yorkshire and Humber. They say that the levelling up investment there dropped from 11% to 5.8%, and it leads to some speculation that this government's kind of giving up, perhaps, on the Red Wall, and perhaps choosing to focus on those marginals or those areas where there might be Blue Wall damage at the next election.
Absolutely not. The way in which the money is allocated is against objective criteria. So we set out our determination to make sure that people in those overlooked communities get support. Then the allocation is scrutinised by experts in government departments in order to make sure that it's rigorous. But as I say, you know, the biggest investment of all is in Morecambe, and across Lancashire we're seeing investment, including communities like Blackburn and Accrington that I mentioned, and that is a deliberate way in which this government is doing more to support these communities. But as well as this investment today, there are other things that we've been doing. So first of all, Arts Council investment. We've said every new pound spent there is spent outside London. Research and development money for the science jobs of the future. We've said we're going to tilt that away from Oxford, Cambridge and London towards the North and the Midlands. And then more recently we've also said new mayors in York and North Yorkshire, in the North East, new powers for people in the North, as well as investment in transport.
There's a big blow for the levelling up, Michael, with the demise of that British battery project in Blythe. A lot of public money involved there. We need, don't we, 10 of these battery factories by 2040. We've now just got one.
Well, the key thing is that the site itself is a very, very good site. Blythe in Northumberland is an excellent location for a gigafactory. The company concerned wasn't able to secure money from the private sector. Companies that can secure money from the private sector we will back and we will support. But obviously, we need to make sure that bids for cash are competitive and that companies are competitive. But the site itself is a brilliant site, and I know that there will be other companies that will be looking to invest there in the future.
Yeah, but as Andrew's saying there, the loss of this, the collapse of British Volt, supposed to create 8,000 jobs. Not great for a country that's struggling with growth. There's a lot of pressure on the Chancellor to try and solve that problem, not least the front of the Mail, Andrew's paper this morning, quoting a number of your own colleagues saying you're going to have to cut taxes in the budget in March or we're going to lose the next election.
Well, the Mail is, you're quite right, a great paper with great writers. On this occasion, though, I can't anticipate what is going to happen in the budget. The Chancellor would have my guts for garters if I tried to tell him what to do there. We have had tax cuts in the past designed to help business. Rishi, when he was Chancellor, introduced the super deduction, which is a way of making sure that companies can spend more on productive plant and capital, like the sort of gizmos behind me, in order to generate growth. And I know that Jeremy is focused on generating more economic growth, but actually the best tax cut of all, for all of us, is bringing inflation down, because inflation actually takes so much out of our wage packets when it is allowed to increase.
One of our most brilliant entrepreneurs, Michael, Sir James Dyson, writing in the Telegraph today, accuses the government of stupid, his words not mine, short-sighted policies on investment and regulation and taxation, which he says are holding back the economy. That's a pretty terrible indictment on the Tory government, coming from somebody who's created so many jobs in this country.
Well, I love Sir James, and one of the key things about Sir James is that he's incredibly ambitious, sets high standards. What I want to do is to bring Sir James up here to the northwest to see what it is that we're doing, how we're backing industry, and also to see how some of the tax cuts that I've mentioned that are helping business to invest are operating, and also talk to him about better regulation, because the Cabinet on Tuesday was looking at how we can do more in order to get the big investments that we need from the private sector by having smarter regulation now that we're outside the EU. I know that Sir James always has brilliant ideas in this space. We're doing a lot, and I just want to make sure that Sir James has the chance to see that. And my invitation to Sir James, of whom I am a huge fan, is please come with me to the northwest, and we can look at what more we can do together.
Just lastly, I want to ask you about February the 6th. Health leaders incredibly concerned about this joint day of action from ambulance workers, call handlers and now nurses as well. It seems as though it's going to cost lives. Patients are going to pay a heavy price for perhaps what some people would see as the intransigence of the government on this.
Well, again, I hope that we can avoid industrial action. The key thing when it comes to the public sector and the pay negotiations that are going on at the moment is that we do want to make sure that people in caring professions get the wages, the salaries that they deserve. But we've also got to look at public spending overall, because we need to make sure that there is an investment, for example, in the NHS and the high-quality equipment that we need in order to keep people safe and well. And we need overall to look at the pressure of pay increases on inflation, because as we were just discussing, what we need to do is to keep inflation down, get it down, in order to ensure that everyone across the economy benefits.
Tiny question, Michael Gove. Your former advisor, Dominic Cummings, said levelling up was a stupid slogan. We read yesterday in the Times that it's going to be called gauging up. Is that so? What is gauging up, then?
I've no idea what gauging up is. We're committed to levelling up.
Right.
And I think that you and I understand that, Andrew, and we know, as you pointed out in your very first question, that it's about helping those communities that have been overlooked in the past, particularly the last Labour government. It didn't really invest in areas like Blackpool and Morecambe and Accrington. It was more concerned with Cool Britannia and North London, not the North West. People in communities like Blackpool understand that we're totally committed to levelling up. And again, my former advisor Dominic Cummings comes from the North East. He comes from County Durham. Well, one of the things that we're doing for levelling up is we're creating a new investment in an area from Barnard Castle to Berwick in order to make sure that there is more cash, including improved transport links, not least around Barnard Castle.
I can't believe you mentioned Barnard Castle in an interview.
You did that
was
rather
a gift.
deliberately.
Michael Gove, Secretary of State for levelling up, not gauging up. Thank you very much indeed for your time this morning.
Just to remind people, Barnard Castle, of course, was famously where Dominic Cummings drove his car through 30 miles to test his eyesight, when most of us would have just gone to Specsavers.
It's very funny to see Mike Ovey. I mean, he's had that almost every job in government, and he's survived. He's the great survivor of this.
He's a great operator, though, isn't he?
He's a
good media
He's
he was so charming.
The reason he survived
you.
is he's so good at media interviews, I think.
Yeah.
But whenever he does that fist bump, you sense that the opposite might be true. When he says we're absolutely committed to levelling up, I think the truth is probably
He's praying.
that he
rather
knows that Rishi Sunak is not as committed to levelling up as he is.
Interesting. What did you make of all of that, Emma?
I mean, I think Freddie's right in that he is one of the Tories' best performers on the media, and he sells a case that he doesn't necessarily believe in very well. But, I mean, it is the case that levelling up has become an empty slogan, a pot in which every Tory hope for anything has been poured into, and 2.1 billion is not going to do that. When you've got levelling up money that was very specifically sold to an electorate on changing the dynamic between city and town, and on north and south, going into Camden. Now, there are areas of massive poverty in Camden. Please don't get me wrong. Camden does need investment, but it doesn't need investment under the Levelling Up Fund. That's a different pot of money, and it should have a different set of priorities. And I would also say that it is very, very disingenuous to say that this is a per capita spend, because actually one of the key things that we should be doing is bringing people back so that people aren't moving away from these areas. So I think it's really important that when this money comes in, what you're investing in is ways of keeping people in the local area rather than sending them into the big cities. And also, my final thought...
Yes.
I would really... a lot of people in Manchester and Liverpool would take very big issue with saying that Cool Britannia was not about the North West.
Fair enough. What did you think about his argument to Sir James, as he put it? I love Sir James.
Yeah. Big fan of Sir James.
If he loves him, can you persuade him to come back here, then? Because he's based himself in Singapore.
Well, I think actually a lot of the business community were very, very unhappy at the November budget.
Yeah, they were.
And you're seeing a lot of disgruntlement from big figures like...
Well, you don't get much bigger than James Dyson.
Yeah.
He's created tens of thousands of jobs here.
And this is another example of the way the Tories are losing on what should be their strong suit. They're alienating businesses, and Labour's appealing to them. Lisa Nandy calls levelling up screwing up, which I think is quite a good report.
I should say we did invite Lisa Nandy onto the show this morning. Probably.
You've said it now.
You've said it now. I'll apologise just in case. Sorry for that.
Yeah.
We did invite Lisa Nandy onto the show, but she won't come on to our channel, so she will empty chair her for that. Emma, let's talk about school transitions in front of the Telegraph. I'm not entirely clear what they mean by the phrase.
So this is guidance that's coming out from the Department for Education on how schools should manage gender transitioning children. So social transition.
I'm just groaning, I'm sorry.
Social transition is different from medical transition. It's when you act into the gender that you say that you associate with. There are massive complications around this, because there are times when a child decides that they do this outside of the home and parents are not told, and that is incredibly difficult and complicated. Because schools should not be keeping this from parents. Parents have a right to know and be involved. But, of course, schools also have to be a place where children feel happy and comfortable. I have personal issues around the idea that there are clothes for a gender. I don't really... the whole concept of gender, for me, is just reverting back to sex stereotypes. This is a minefield. The DfE are probably going to send out what will be some quite sensible, I suspect, guidance that will plough the middle furrow and please nobody.
I have to say, 0.5% of the population identifies as transgender. The proportion of our time on this channel and our day from the Department of Education spent talking about this.
Rather than talking about this, I'm sure, very important issue for these children, it should actually be talking about how the hell it's going to cope when these kids are sent home from school
because of the strikes.
Because of the strikes. That's what really matters.
I totally take the point that it's a very small percentage of the population, but I'm not sure it is going to be such a small percentage of the population in the future, because if you look among children, the rates are increasing dramatically, because we're essentially telling children, don't think you are the sex that you think you are. And that can be very disorientating. Gender dysphoria is on the rise. We are messing up our children's minds. And it's extremely dangerous.
And thank heavens that Rishi Sunak's government has stepped in to say it's going to stop this nonsense in Scotland.
Well, yes, we'll see how that pans out.
16-year-olds can
yes
change
and
their
no.
gender without even talking to a doctor.
Let's be conscious of what has happened.
Hang on, let Emma have a say very quickly.
They're not necessarily going to stop, because gender policy is reserved in Scotland. But the reason that they've had to invoke the Section 35 is because this impacts on UK-wide equality laws.
I've got to interrupt you and end that paper review. Emma Burnell, Freddie Gray, thank you so much. Otherwise, we will miss our advert break, and we can't do that. We'll be back just after this.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Well, the NHS is facing the biggest day of industrial action in its history next month. Nurses are continuing striking today.
Good morning. It's 1 minute past 9 on Thursday, the 19th of January. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News with Isabel, Webster and Andrew Pearce.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Patients facing unprecedented disruption in the health service next month, with ambulance and nursing staff staging joint walkouts. It comes as thousands of nurses begin a second consecutive day of strike action.
The Chancellor won't include any tax cuts in his next budget due in March, Treasury insiders have revealed. Tory MPs have reacted with anger, with former party leader Ian Duncan-Smith saying that not cutting tax could cost the party the next election.
And the King has asked for the profits from a £1 billion wind farm development on Crown Estate land to be used for the wider public good. It could have gone into the coffers of the monarchy. Of course, remember, His Majesty highlighted the anxiety and hardship of that cost of living crisis in his first Christmas message.
And you've got half an hour left with the programme to let us know your views this morning. Send them in via Twitter or email, and don't forget to let us know where you're watching or listening from. Now, the NHS could be facing the worst day of strike action in its history, with ambulance and nursing staff staging joint walkouts next month.
It comes as that second day of nursing strike kicks off across 55 trusts in England. Patients could again face disruption to operations and appointments. Well, they will face disruption, though emergency care will continue.
Well, a 24-hour strike by the Welsh Ambulance Service also begins today, with another walkout scheduled for Monday.
Our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis joins the nurses' picket line in Derby yesterday, and he has the story.
Under the watchful eye of history's most famous health worker, Florence Nightingale, the nurses of the present fight for the future of their profession. Ellie has joined the picket here in Derby. She works in the community.
Me personally, I can't do the kind of nursing that I want to do, the kind of nursing that I trained to do, and the reason that I came to the job. You're rushing around, you finish work at the end of the day feeling like you haven't done a good job for your patients. When it's right, it's the most rewarding job in the world, and that's why we do it, and that's why we're here fighting for a better profession, for people to want to do the job, so there's enough of us to provide really good care.
There are picket lines like this one in Derby across the country, and it doesn't really matter where you go because you'll hear the same answers from the nurses, that this strike is about pay and working conditions, because it seems that you can't improve one without doing something about the other.
Sam has worked in the NHS for 13 years. He may be outnumbered by his female colleagues, but he's facing the same financial challenges.
Everything's going up. You know, we're now having to look more and more into our bank accounts. I'm having to, the week before payday comes along, I'm having to budget that a lot more.
In the last independent pay review, NHS workers were given, on average, a 4% pay rise. Amidst high inflation, the Royal College of Nursing says that's not enough. Sandy is from the union. She says they won't back down until the government negotiates on pay.
We don't want to end it without negotiations, and we will continue. Our mandate is until the end of May for us to be able to strike, and as it stands at the moment, we would go back out to ballot our members at the end of May to see if they wanted to continue striking if nothing's been brought to the table.
Nurses have agreed exemptions, like covering chemotherapy and dialysis, but the strikes are hurting an already troubled health service. Newly announced action by NHS colleagues in the ambulance service will fall on the same day in February as nursing strikes. The challenges for both the NHS and the government are great. Health Secretary Steve Barclay.
Well, I want to work constructively with the trade unions in terms of the pay review body process. Those are the discussions we have. That is a constructive way that I and other ministers are engaging with our respective trade unions. But ultimately, we need to act in the interests of the patient.
Frozen in place, it appears that this dispute will outlast winter. Will Hollis for GB News in Derby.
Well, let's cross now to Merseyside. We can speak to our North West of England reporter, Sophie Reaper. Good morning again to you, Sophie. I can see you've got somebody there to speak to. Let's have a listen to what they have to say this morning.
Yes, good morning to you both. We're still here at Wiston Hospital in Merseyside. I'm joined by newly qualified staff nurse Hannah, who's going to talk to me a little bit about the strikes. Now, as we say, Hannah, you only qualified in September. Talk to me a bit about your experience so far.
I do think my experience hasn't really changed from being a student to newly qualified, in the sense of I've always dealt with staff shortages, we're underworked, we're underpaid, but the jump from student to newly qualified, it's a crazy amount of responsibility. We haven't got the staff there, patients are suffering for that, we're suffering, the amount of staff that are off with stress, it's not safe on the wards, and something needs to change.
There's a lot of reports that nurses will train to become a nurse, but then they won't actually get a job within the profession. What have you had an experience like with that? What about your cohort?
My cohort alone, there was at least 50% that went off and done something else.
Why do you think that is?
Throughout when we were a student, you can see yourself. We've done it through COVID, so we've seen the shortages even more. We've seen more patients than we'd ever seen before, and I just think a lot of people were put off because especially there's a lot of staff that don't want to be there no more. The morale's not there. It's not the nicest environment sometimes.
Thank you so much for your time this morning, Hannah. We can see here that there's still a lot of support for the nurses. There's people beeping, driving past. We're expecting around 200 nurses to be on the picket line today, and we'll be bringing you updates as we go.
Indeed, of course, it's not just the nurses, the ambulances as well going on strike in Wales today. And Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer were clashing over those ongoing strikes during PMQs yesterday. Let's have a listen to what they were saying.
If they were in Northampton, it wouldn't arrive until 2:20. If they were in Plymouth, it wouldn't arrive until 2:50. That's why someone who fears a heart attack waiting more than 2.5 hours for an ambulance. Not the worst case scenario, just the average wait. So for 1 week, will he stop blaming others, take some responsibility, and just admit, under his watch, the NHS is in crisis, isn't it?
Mr. Speaker, I noticed that one place the honourable gentleman didn't mention was Wales, where we know ambulance times are even worse than they are in England, Mr. Speaker. No, and the reason that is the case, because this is not about politics. This is about the fact that the NHS in Scotland, in Wales, in England is dealing with unprecedented challenges, recovering from COVID, dealing with a very virulent and early flu season, and everyone is doing their best to bring those wait times down.
Well, our national reporter Paul Hawkins is in Cardiff this morning as ambulance workers there prepare to take to the picket line. Paul, morning. Some people watching those exchanges may have thought, what's he banging on about Wales for, and why are Tory MPs roaring with approval? Because he omitted a rather important point.
Yeah, which is that the Welsh Government is Labour and has been Labour for some time, which is why it makes great political capital for someone like Rishi Sunak. But this is the first Unite Ambulance Day of Industrial Action in Wales. We've had industrial days from striking days from the GMB Union, but this is the first one for Unite in Wales. We can speak to Corenzo, who's from the Unite Union. First of all, fair pay. That's what you're calling for. What is fair pay to you?
Well, fair pay will address the cost of living crisis that are affecting us all, but in particular ambulance staff and other NHS workers. We're looking for a cost of living pay increase, something that matches at least inflation. So over the last few years, NHS pay has been eroded dramatically, and the value of the pay has gone down because it hasn't kept in touch with inflation. So we want to make sure the government addresses this, has pay talks now, to make sure there is a fair pay rise for the 22-23 pay year, because they're not getting it.
Well, how do you feel when they say they can't afford it?
Well, we all know they can afford to actually decrease taxes on bankers' bonuses. The government can afford it. You know, there's been a chronic underinvestment in the NHS over many years, and they've made political choices to make sure that our NHS is in crisis. Unfortunately, there's a staffing crisis throughout the NHS in the UK, which means they need to address pay to retain and recruit people to do those vital jobs in the NHS.
And that's why the dispute is also about conditions. So let's find out why conditions matter as much as the pay dispute itself. We can speak to Sean and Ian. You're a paramedic and
Yes,
you're EMT.
Yeah.
Just first of all, just tell us about the conditions at the moment. What is it like? And you've been a paramedic for 37 years.
Yeah, I've been 37 years, so basically huge change. The biggest problem we've got at the moment is hospital handover delays. So ambulances are stuck with maybe one patient or two patients maximum in a 12-hour shift they're attending. There's social care when they're for discharge. There's no real carers. They're not being paid enough. People can't get discharged, so we've got bed blocking.
I mean, give us that specific example. You were saying the other day you were parked outside a hospital and you had a nana with you, elderly lady.
Well, the problem we've got is you've got patients that are probably stuck in an ambulance for about 8 hours. We've got issues then about dignity, toileting that patient. In the back of an ambulance isn't suitable. Also feeding the patient. The back of an ambulance is meant to be a sterile environment, and to expect an elderly or really ill patient to use a cardboard receptacle to go to the toilet in is not really what we want and the service we want to provide.
Yeah, and when someone says that Ian, someone says someone could die. I mean, we know that the red calls, as they're called in Wales, or Category 1 calls, life-threatening calls, will be attended to, but someone could die. What do you say to that?
It's unfortunate that maybe that could happen, but that could happen every day of the week. So every day of the week so far, because of the delays at the hospitals. We've got 13, 14, maybe 17 ambulances outside. Now, Sean could ask for backup, but he's not going to get it, because we all got patients on the back of an ambulance, which we're toileting, and we're looking after in the back because we can't get them into the hospital. It's not the hospital's fault, it's the back door. The back door has been locked, and it's been locked for 20-odd years, right? Because the government had not done anything about it, right? And our conditions are poor.
And just very quickly, anything you want to add to that?
Sorry?
Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, basically, what Ian's alluding to is I'm on what they call a Charo car, which is the response car. I can be waiting on scene with a cardiac arrest, and the nearest ambulance might be 20, 30 minutes away from me. And as I say, we've all been highly trained in the skilled, and we're not able to do the job and give the care that we have joined this job to do.
And that's what this is. That's a big part of what this dispute is all about. So not just pay, but also conditions, and that's why they're taking this day of industrial action today, Unite, and they're also striking on Monday as well.
OK, Paul, thank you very much indeed. Let's get some analysis on all of this from our political correspondent, Tom Harwood. So, I mean, lots to dig into there, not least our interview with Michael Gove as well. What do you make of it all?
Gosh, well, let's start with the strikes, because this is the big thing that people will be really feeling over the coming days, weeks and indeed months. And I think there is a distinction that we can draw between the way that the nurses are going about their striking action and the way that paramedics and ambulance drivers are going about their striking action. And the distinction is this. The nursing union has agreed with the government to provide a minimum level of service across the country to make sure that, frankly, lives can be saved and the disruption can be, yes, there, but limited, but its impact does not have to go as far as it might. The ambulance drivers haven't come to such an agreement with the government. There are no minimum safety levels. There is no uniform level of service across the country as the nurses have agreed. And this is a real big concern for people, particularly as we've seen that ambulance waiting times have been such an acute problem across the NHS in all corners of the United Kingdom. And this is one of the big motivators behind the minimum service level legislation that we've seen starting its journey through Parliament this week. The government wants to set in law what they've already agreed with the nurses, but that the ambulance unions have not agreed to do.
Isn't that the point? They're different unions here. The Royal College of Nursing operates quite separately from the trade unions that ambulance workers are represented by.
That's certainly the case. And we've seen this in other sectors as well. If we look at the school strikes, it's the National Education Union that has voted for a strike. The head teachers union and the support staff unions have not voted to go on strike. So there is a differentiation here in terms of what some people are voting for and what others are doing as well, or even those who go on strike, the way they go about it as well. There's a huge array of diversity across different sectors that we're seeing, and that complicates the picture. We've seen different government departments in recent weeks sit down with all these different unions, and also sometimes with the employers of the union, where the government isn't the direct employer, to try and sort it all out.
OK, well, we didn't manage to get on to the Levelling Up Secretary, but that's OK. We've got some of that in the bulletins. Tom Harwood, for now, thank you very much indeed. With the time at 9:16, let's bring you up to date now with the rest of today's top stories.
The government has announced £2 billion for more than 100 levelling up projects in the UK. The money will go towards better transport links, community regeneration and restoring local heritage sites. Earlier this morning, Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove told us where and how the money is being allocated.
The way in which the money is allocated is against objective criteria. So we set out our determination to make sure that people in those overlooked communities get support. Then the allocation is scrutinised by experts in government departments in order to make sure that it's rigorous. But as I say, you know, the biggest investment of all is in Morecambe and across Lancashire. We're seeing investment, including in communities like Blackburn and Accrington that I mentioned, and that is a deliberate way in which this government is doing more to support these communities.
Manchester Airport's runways have now reopened after flights were grounded earlier due to heavy snow. The Met Office has issued yellow snow and ice warnings for Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales as bitterly cold temperatures continue to grip the UK.
And the New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has announced she's quitting as the Prime Minister next month. She's just 42, saying she hasn't got enough in the tank to lead the country anymore. She'll step down as party leader next month with a vote to determine her replacement shortly afterwards. A general election in New Zealand in October.
Say, I've just spotted Keir Starmer's just tweeted about Jacinda Ardern whilst we were reading that out. He's paying tribute to her as a true global leader. Her passion, integrity and achievements in office are an inspiration.
Yeah, and she was inspirational, I would say, unlike Keir Starmer. Now, coming up from Corrie Star to Cheesemonger, we're getting a lesson in cheddar from Sean Wilson.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other pay-per-review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
We've just been having a little bit of breakfast, haven't we?
Very nice.
We've got a cheese platter here because we are talking all things cheese with Sean Wilson, also, well, not just a cheesemaker himself, but best known for his role as Martin Platt in Coronation Street. But lots of other talents as well.
Certainly has, because he's a chef. He's also a cheesemaker. I'm in awe. And he's just published a new book called, great title, Cheddar Gorged. And he joins us now. Very clever title.
Good morning.
Morning.
Hello.
Has it been a long love affair with cheese for you?
Are we good?
We are.
Cheese. Why a love affair with cheese, Martin? Did you always love cheese? Sean. I mean Sean.
The name's Sean.
Oh, dear.
I've always had a deep love of real.
You know what? We can't hear you, I'm afraid, Sean Wilson. We're going to try and have a little fix of that and see if we can do anything about that. It must be part
I called him Martin.
I'm sure that happens all the time.
So embarrassing. So apologies, Sean, because I know you're still listening. We are going to try and get him back. I'm in awe about how you make cheese. We don't know where to start.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's really interesting because he talks about making cheese from unpasteurised milk sometimes, and he likes that taste of, to quote him, alchemy, which is kind of an interesting concept. But, yeah, what an interesting life to have gone from a stalwart of British soaps to a cheesemaker.
Yeah.
Actually, when I interviewed Barbara Windsor's widow not so long ago, a widower, I referred to her as Peggy. So it's part of the job. I think that just once they're in your heart.
I suppose it's also a credit to how well they act the role. Because, I mean, Martin Platt,
he's a superstar.
Big part of the programme.
Yeah, absolutely.
My late mum never missed Coronation Street.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest, isn't it, in the country. What about Cheddar Gorge? Ever been there?
Yes.
What do you think of it?
It's magnificent.
Out of nowhere, you could just be driving through the Somerset Hills and suddenly this
there
incredible gorge. And, of course, that is where cheddar cheese originates from. And somebody who knows more about all of this, of course, is Sean Wilson. Apparently, the sound is all fixed. Sean, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Fabulous, fabulous. Right, you've written this book, Cheddar Gorged. What's it all about?
Yes. So I met the publisher and I just said, you know, I think a good title would be Cheddar Gorged. And then he had me extol the virtues for the next 2 hours, and then he told me he was sold with the title.
Good. OK, well, it's a good start.
How did you learn how to make cheese?
I'm sorry, how did I learn?
How did you learn how to make cheese?
So I have a little poem here from the book. It might it's only about 10 lines, but it might just answer your question. Would you like me to read it for you? Milk,
I'm sorry, I'm just going to call it. I'm afraid we just don't have a good enough internet connection for that. What a shame. Just means we have to fill the next minute with
eating cheese here, because we wanted to ask him all about it.
Do you know, we've got a truffle cheese here, and it is so strong, you can smell it from miles away.
But he says that breakfast with cheese on toast and frittatas, or even street food, is a really nice thing to do.
Well, more than that, he says that cheddar, excuse me, with my mouth full of truffle cheese, excuse me, can also be used in ice cream. Would you ever eat a cheesy ice cream?
Well, as I never eat ice cream, no.
You're so healthy, although I was surprised to see you tucking into the cheddar there.
Breakfast.
Yeah, fair enough. That's your breakfast now. You're done.
It is. Yeah.
Well, look, we did our best with that. I'm afraid we couldn't bring you more of that
And
interview.
Sean, if you're listening, sorry I called you Martin, but it is a tribute to the fact you played Martin Platt
Absolutely,
so
yeah,
well.
it's a compliment, really.
Yeah.
That's it from us. It's been lovely. It's flown
Very
past
nice.
this morning. Stephen and Ellie will be back bright and early tomorrow.
And I'll be back here tomorrow at
You've
12
got
till
your own
2
show
for
as
my
well,
own show.
and wonderful Tom Harwood up next. Have a great day.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.